What if I told you that hidden in museum storage rooms right now are artifacts that could completely rewrite history as we know it? Ancient batteries, impossibly precise ancient tools, and objects that shouldn't exist for thousands of years, all locked away because they don't fit the official timeline. Today, I am revealing 10 artifacts that museums don't want you asking questions about. In a basement 47 feet below London's most famous museum, there is a storage room labelled Chronological Anomalies. The door hasn't been opened for public tours in 23 years. This isn't the story of what hangs on museum walls, the carefully curated narratives, the polished displays, the artifacts chosen to tell a comfortable story about human progress. This is the story of what stays hidden, deep beneath the marble floors and vaulted ceilings of the world's greatest museums. In climate-controlled rooms that smell of old cardboard and preservation chemicals sit millions of objects the public never sees. Walk through any major museum and you're experiencing less than 5% of what they actually possess. The British Museum displays roughly 80,000 objects. They own 8 million. The Smithsonian shows a fraction of its 154 million artifacts. The Vatican Museums, the Louvre, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, all operate on the same principle. Most of what they know stays locked away. This is normal. They tell you space is limited. Not everything can be displayed. Curators must make choices. Some objects are too fragile for light exposure. Others require specialized context. Many are duplicates, variations on themes already represented in the galleries above. But among those millions of stored objects, in rooms with restricted access and catalogues marked with careful notations, are artifacts that create problems. Objects that don't fit the accepted timeline of human history. Pieces that demonstrate knowledge or capabilities that shouldn't exist in their time period. Items that force uncomfortable questions about who made them, how they made them, and what it means that they exist at all. Museum professionals have a term for these objects, used quietly in academic circles: chronological inconveniences. They re-authentic, carbon-dated, provenanced, documented. They re-not frauds or misidentifications. They re-simply impossible, according to everything we've been taught about the gradual, linear progression of human civilization from primitive stone age hunters to modern technological society. Some of these artifacts have been moved from public display to storage over the decades. Others were never displayed at all, catalogued and shelved upon acquisition. A curator at a major European museum, speaking off the record, once described the dilemma. We have objects we can explain. If we display them, we validate questions we can answer. If we don't display them, we re-accused of hiding evidence. So we catalogue them meticulously, we study them quietly, and we wait for better explanations. The artifacts you are about to encounter are real. They've been examined by credentialed archaeologists, analysed in university laboratories, and written about in academic journals, though often buried in technical language that obscures their significance. They re-not alien artifacts or magical objects. They re-stone, metal, clay, and organic material. But their existence challenges the fundamental timeline we use to organize human history. To understand why these artifacts remain hidden, we need to first understand what they are, and what they suggest about a history far stranger than the textbooks admit. Everything you learned about human history follows a simple rule: primitive past, advanced present. But what if the rule itself is wrong? The timeline is familiar because it has been repeated in every history classroom for generations. Humanity begins roughly 300,000 years ago with anatomically modern humans in Africa. For the vast majority of that time, hundreds of thousands of years, humans lived as hunter-gatherers, nomadic groups following animal migrations and seasonal plant resources. They used stone tools, controlled fire, and slowly developed more sophisticated behaviors: art, ritual burial, complex language. Then, approximately 10,000 years ago, everything changed. The agricultural revolution transformed human society. People domesticated plants and animals, settled in permanent villages, and began the long march towards civilization. Around 5,000 years ago, the first cities appeared in Mesopotamia and Egypt. Uruk, Babylon, Memphis. Writing emerged to track trade and tribute. Complex social hierarchies developed. Bronze tools replaced stone. Architecture became monumental. From there, the progression continues in neat phases. The Bronze Age gives way to the Iron Age. Classical civilizations, Greece, Rome, China create philosophy, democracy, engineering marvels. The medieval period preserves knowledge through dark ages. The Renaissance rediscovers classical learning. The Enlightenment births modern science. The Industrial Revolution mechanizes production. Each phase builds on the last, a ladder of progress climbing toward modernity. This narrative is taught as settled science, supported by decades of archaeological consensus, carbon dating, and stratigraphic analysis. Museums organize their collections around this timeline. Egypt goes in one wing, dated to 3000 BCE, Greece in another, dated to 800 BCE onward. Pre-Columbian Americas in a separate section, with civilizations emerging around 1200 BCE. Every artifact gets placed in its proper temporal box, creating an orderly story of human development. The timeline's power lies in its simplicity. It makes sense. It feels intuitive. Simple tools come before complex ones. Small settlements precede large cities. Local cultures emerge before global trade networks. Humanity starts primitive and becomes sophisticated through slow incremental innovation. But this timeline was largely constructed in the 19th and early 20th centuries, when archaeological methods were crude by modern standards. Early archaeologists made assumptions based on limited evidence and Victorian-era prejudices about primitive versus civilized peoples. Those assumptions became foundation stones for everything built afterward. New discoveries get interpreted through this existing framework. Artifacts get dated, based partly on where they fit in the established chronology. The system usually works. Most artifacts do fit the timeline. They confirm our understanding, filling in details of how people lived, traded, and fought within their established historical periods. But occasionally, more often than mainstream archaeology readily acknowledges, objects appear that don't fit. Objects demonstrating precision manufacturing in periods when only crude hand tools supposedly existed. Maps showing geographical knowledge that shouldn't be available for thousands of years. Evidence of astronomical understanding predating its official discovery by centuries. When such objects appear, the institutional response follows a pattern. First, scrutiny: is the artifact authentic? Could it be a hoax, a misidentified later object, or contamination from a different time period? If authentication holds, the questions shift. Is the dating correct? Could there be errors in carbon dating or stratigraphic placement? If dating holds, interpretations adjust. Perhaps ancient people were more capable than we thought, within their known technological limits. Perhaps what looks like machine precision is actually patient hand work. Perhaps geographical knowledge was luckier guess work than we assume. Rarely does the question become, is the timeline itself wrong? Now that we understand the official story, let's examine the first artifact that museums quietly removed from display. An object so precisely made that it shouldn't exist for another 2,000 years. The difference between a museum treasure and a storage room secret often comes down to one thing: whether it fits the story we've agreed to tell. Before we examine specific artifacts, we need to establish the rules of this investigation. This isn't a journey into pseudoscience or conspiracy theory. We're not chasing ancient aliens, mythical Atlantis, or mystical lost continents. We're re-examining real, documented objects that create genuine problems for conventional historical chronology, using the confusion of credentialed experts as our guide. Every artifact in this investigation meets 4 strict criteria. First, it must be physically real and documented, not mythological, not based on legends or ancient texts, but an actual object you could theoretically visit in a museum storage facility. Second, it must have been studied by mainstream archaeological or scientific institutions, university laboratories, government museums, or established research organizations. We're not relying on fringe researchers alone, but on the work of credentialed professionals. Third, its existence must create genuine chronological problems, according to conventional dating methods and technological assumptions. And fourth, there must be evidence of its removal from public display, limited exhibition, or institutional reluctance to showcase it prominently. This methodology matters because it separates legitimate mystery from fantasy. Many out-of-place artifacts turn out to be hoaxes, misidentifications, or objects with conventional explanations once properly analyzed. Others are real but misunderstood. Their impossibility, reflects our assumptions rather than genuine chronological problems. We re-interested in the residue, objects that remain genuinely puzzling even after skeptical scrutiny. The concept we re-exploring is technological anachronism, objects demonstrating knowledge or manufacturing capability that predates their supposed invention by centuries or millennia. A mechanism requiring precision gears found centuries before gear. Cutting technology existed. Stone vessels showing machining tolerances achievable only with modern lathes, created by cultures using copper chisels. Maps displaying geographical features discoverable only with technologies unavailable to their creators. These aren't subjective mysteries based on interpretation of symbols or meanings. They re-objective impossibilities based on measurable precision, demonstrable knowledge, or documented capabilities that conventional chronology can't explain. We re-examining 10 categories of artifacts, each representing a different challenge to historical orthodoxy. Some involve precision manufacturing that exceeds the capabilities of known ancient tools. Others demonstrate astronomical or geographical knowledge, acquired centuries before its official discovery. Some suggest trans-oceanic contact between civilizations supposedly isolated by uncrossable seas. Others point to catastrophic events that may have reset human civilization, erasing evidence of earlier sophistication. For each artifact, we'll acknowledge legitimate debates. Dating methods have margins of error. Archaeological context can be ambiguous. What looks like impossible precision might have conventional explanations we have considered. Some anomalies might be frauds or misidentifications, despite initial authentication. Skepticism is healthy. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But we'll also resist reflexive dismissal. When an artifact creates problems, the response shouldn't be automatic rejection, but serious investigation. When multiple independent examples from different cultures and time periods show similar anomalies, patterns emerge that demand explanation. When museums remove objects from display after they generate controversy, it suggests institutional discomfort with questions rather than confidence in conventional answers. This investigation is about questions, not definitive answers. We re-exploring why certain objects create such discomfort in academic circles. We re-examining what it might mean if our historical timeline needs revision. We re-asking whether humanity's past is more complex, more sophisticated, and more mysterious than the neat progression we've been taught. The goal isn't to replace one dogma with another, but to approach historical evidence with genuine curiosity. Following the evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads to uncomfortable uncertainty. With our framework established, we begin our journey in the ancient Middle East, where the first artifact waits, a battery that predates electrical understanding by 1,800 years. In 1938, archaeologists unearthed clay jars near Baghdad that could generate electricity. The discovery was 2,000 years too early. The Kujut Rabu site, just outside modern Baghdad, had been systematically looted for decades before German archaeologist Wilhelm König arrived to conduct proper excavations. Among the pottery shards and broken tablets, he found something that didn't belong, clay jars about 5 inches tall, each containing a copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt bitumen. Inside each copper cylinder, suspended without touching the sides, was an iron rod capped with another layer of asphalt. König recognized the configuration immediately. It matched the design of a modern galvanic cell, the type Alessandro Volta would invent in 1800 CE to create the first electrical battery. But these jars weren't from 1800. They dated to the Parthian Empire, somewhere between 200 BCE and 200 CE, 2,000 years before electricity was discovered. The design is almost elegant in its simplicity. Fill the jar with an acidic liquid, vinegar, wine, or citrus juice, and the differing electrical potentials between copper and iron create an electrochemical reaction. Electrons flow through the liquid from the iron rod to the copper cylinder, generating approximately 1 to 2 volts of electricity. Not enough to power a light bulb, but definitely measurable voltage. Modern replicas have proven the concept works. Engineers and experimenters have built exact copies using the same materials: clay, copper, iron, and asphalt. When filled with vinegar or lemon juice, they produce electrical current without fail. The design isn't accidental. Someone understood that combining these specific materials in this specific configuration would create something useful. But useful for what? Koenig proposed electroplating, using electrical current to deposit thin layers of gold onto jewelry or ritual objects. The Parthians were skilled goldsmiths, and electroplating would explain the remarkably even gold coatings on some artifacts from this period. Other researchers suggest medical applications, ancient shock therapy, for pain relief. Still others propose religious uses. Priests could create miraculous tingling sensations in temple rituals, demonstrating divine presence through electrical current. Their congregations could see or understand. The conventional response has been to question whether these are batteries at all. Perhaps they re-storage vessels for scrolls with the copper and iron, serving some preservation function we don't understand. Perhaps the electrical properties are coincidental. No one intended them to generate current, and the configuration that creates voltage is an accident of storage design. But this explanation strains credibility. The design is too specific, too consistent across multiple examples, too perfect a match for galvanic cell principles. If these aren't T-batteries, they re the most improbable accident in archaeological history. Vessels coincidentally designed in the exact configuration needed to generate electricity, created by metalworkers who just happened to choose the precise metals whose interaction creates electrochemical reactions. What makes this artifact particularly problematic for museums is its implication. If the Parthians understood electrical principles 2,000 years before Volta, what else did ancient people know that we've attributed to modern discovery? The Baghdad battery opens a door to uncomfortable questions about the completeness of our knowledge timeline. Initially, the Baghdad batteries were displayed in museums. There is photographic evidence of Koenig's specimens on exhibit in Baghdad before the Iraq Museum's collection was damaged during the 2003 war. But over time, these artifacts migrated to storage or were reclassified in catalogues as ritual vessels of unknown purpose, downplaying their electrical properties. The silence around them is telling. Pick up any general history of electricity, and you'll find Alessandro Volta, credited with the battery's invention in 1800. You'll read about Benjamin Franklin's kite experiments, about Luigi Galvani's work with frog legs and electrical current. But you find the Baghdad batteries. They exist in archaeological papers, in specialized journals, in footnotes. But not in the mainstream narrative of technological history, because acknowledging them means acknowledging that our timeline might be wrong. That electrical knowledge existed, was used for some purpose, and then was completely lost, leaving no textual evidence, no continuation, no trace, except these clay jars that generate voltage when you fill them with vinegar. Electrical knowledge in ancient Iraq is puzzling enough, but our next artifact suggests something even more unsettling. That precision engineering existed millennia before we invented the tools to achieve it. In a Roman shipwreck, divers found a machine so advanced that when scientists finally understood it, they couldn't believe ancient Greeks built it. The year was 1901. Greek sponge divers working off the coast of Antikythera, a small island between Crete and mainland Greece, found a Roman shipwreck at 150 feet depth. Among the amphoras, bronze statues and luxury goods, destined for some wealthy Roman's villa, they recovered a corroded lump of bronze and wood, fused together by centuries underwater. For decades, this lump sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, catalogued as a navigational device, probably an astrolabe for measuring the positions of stars. No one looked closely. It was just another piece of corroded metal from a shipwreck that had yielded far more impressive statues and jewellery. Then, in the 1970s, researchers subjected the lump to X-ray analysis. The images revealed something impossible. Inside the corrosion were more than 30 precisely meshed bronze gears, plates covered with inscriptions, and a complex mechanical system unlike anything known from antiquity. This wasn't a simple astrolabe. It was a sophisticated astronomical calculator, an analog computer designed to track the movements of celestial bodies. Further analysis revealed the mechanism's capabilities. Turn the crank on the side, and the gears rotate, calculating the positions of the sun, moon, and planets on any given date. It predicts solar and lunar eclipses decades in advance. It tracks the 4-year cycle of ancient Olympic Games. It accounts for the moon's elliptical orbit, a detail requiring sophisticated astronomical observation and mathematical understanding. The engineering is extraordinary. The gears mesh with precision tolerances measured in fractions of a millimeter. They employ differential gearing, a technique for combining multiple gear trains to perform complex calculations not reinvented in European clockwork until the 16th century, 1,700 years later. The tooth cutting shows remarkable consistency, suggesting specialized tools and mathematical understanding of gear ratios. Modern attempts to understand the Antikythera mechanism required teams of engineers, historians, and computer scientists working for decades. They used X-ray computed tomography, polynomial texture mapping, and three-dimensional imaging to reverse engineer the device. They built replicas using modern precision machining, computer-controlled mills, and lathes. Yet the original was built around 100 BCE during the late Hellenistic period. The Greeks who created it had bronze tools, possibly some iron tools, and enormous skill, but no power tools, no microscopes, no computer-aided design. How did they cut gears with such precision? How did they design the intricate gear trains? How did they understand the complex mathematics required to model celestial mechanics? And perhaps most troubling, where are all the other complex machines? If Greek civilization possessed this level of mechanical sophistication in 100 BCE, we expect to find evidence of a broader tradition of precision engineering. We expect to find simpler machines, showing the developmental stages leading to the Antikythera mechanism. We expect to find workshops with specialized tools, textual descriptions of construction methods, or earlier prototypes showing the evolution of the design. Instead, we have one device, recovered from a shipwreck by accident, representing a level of technology that appears fully formed with no apparent predecessors and no descendants. For over 1,000 years after its creation, nothing comparable appears in the archaeological record. The knowledge simply vanished. When the mechanism's complexity was finally understood in the late 20th century, many scholars initially refused to accept that ancient Greeks built it. Some suggested it must be a much later object, contaminating an older shipwreck. Others proposed it was too complex to be ancient, perhaps a Renaissance-era device lost at sea and coincidentally found near ancient wreckage. Carbon dating of the wooden fragments and stylistic analysis of the inscriptions finally settled the debate. It is genuinely ancient, genuinely Greek, and genuinely impossible according to conventional understanding of ancient technological capabilities. Today, the Antikythera mechanism is displayed in Athens, but its implications are downplayed. Museum labels emphasize Greek astronomical knowledge, while soft, peddling the engineering impossibility. The device is presented as an impressive but isolated achievement, rather than evidence of a broader technological sophistication that somehow left almost no trace. Complex gears in ancient Greece suggest lost engineering knowledge, but engineering requires precise measurement, capabilities that our next artifact proves existed thousands of years earlier than officially recognized. Egyptian vases from 3000 BCE show machining precision that modern engineers can only achieve with computer-controlled lathes. The Egyptians supposedly used copper chisels. In museum storage facilities across Egypt and in collections scattered through European and American museums, there are thousands of stone vessels that nobody talks about. They date to Egypt, pre-dynastic and early dynastic periods, before 3000 BCE, before the pyramids, before written hieroglyphics. According to conventional chronology, they were created by people using copper chisels, stone hammers, and bronze saws. Yet these vessels demonstrate precision that defies those tool limitations. Engineer Christopher Dunn spent years measuring these artifacts with modern precision instruments, micrometers, calipers, and coordinate measuring machines. What he documented is startling. Granite and diorite, vases with perfectly symmetrical curves, wall thicknesses uniform to within thousandths of an inch, and internal surfaces that are mirror-flat. Some vessels have narrow necks and wide internal chambers, physically impossible to create by hand. Chiseling. You can reach inside with a chisel to hollow out the interior. Others show internal corners at precise right angles, as if machined with rotating tools. The materials themselves create additional problems. Diorite rates 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, nearly as hard as quartz. Granite is similarly hard. These aren't T-soft stones that can be easily shaped. Modern stonemasons working with granite use diamond, tipped saws and carbide drills. The ancient Egyptians, according to conventional archaeology, used copper tools. Copper rates 3 on the Mohs scale, meaning it is softer than the stone it is supposedly cutting. The standard explanation involves abrasive slurry. Copper saws used with sand or corundum powder to gradually abrade through stone. Experimental archaeology has proven this technique works for rough shaping, but the precision documented in these vessels exceeds what abrasion can achieve. You can accidentally create uniformly thick walls or perfectly symmetrical curves by hand. Grinding. It requires controlled removal of material with consistent pressure and rotation speeds. Some vessels show rotational symmetry, suggesting they were turned on some type of lathe, a rotating tool that holds the workpiece steady while cutting instruments shape it. Modern stone. Working lathes are massive machines with electric motors, rigid frames, and precision bearings. What did the Egyptians use? No ancient lathes have been found, no textual descriptions of such tools, no wall paintings showing their operation. Yet the evidence is literally carved in stone. These vessels exist. You can measure them. You can verify the precision. Museums display some of them, usually labeled decorative vessels or ritual objects, with no mention of the precision specifications. The technical impossibility is never highlighted in public exhibits. The same precision problem appears throughout ancient Egypt. Granite sarcophagi in the Serapeum of Saqqara have internal corners at perfect right angles and opposing faces that are parallel within thousandths of an inch. Massive granite blocks at Giza show flat surfaces across several square meters, precision difficult to achieve even with modern equipment. Stone statues show tool marks suggesting high speed rotation, striations, and cut patterns characteristic of machinery rather than hand tools. Modern craftsmen have attempted to replicate this precision using ancient tools. All attempts have failed to achieve comparable results. Stone carvers using copper chisels and abrasive slurry can shape stone, but the work shows irregularities, asymmetries, and surface roughness. The ancient Egyptian work shows none of these characteristics. It looks machined. This creates a profound dilemma. Either the ancient Egyptians possessed precision tools we haven't discovered or can't recognize in the archaeological record, or they developed hand techniques so sophisticated that modern craftsmen with power tools can't replicate them, or the artifacts are much later than their archaeological context suggests, perhaps created during a more technologically advanced period and mistakenly associated with earlier cultures. None of these explanations is satisfying. The first requires imagining advanced technology that left no other trace. The second requires attributing superhuman skill to ancient workers. The third requires widespread misdating and contextual confusion. What is certain is that these objects exist. Their precision is measurable, and conventional explanations struggle to account for them. Museums prefer not to highlight this struggle. Better to display the artifacts as artistic achievements and avoid the uncomfortable technical questions. Precision engineering in prehistoric Egypt forces us to reconsider technological capabilities, but precision requires knowledge, astronomical, mathematical, geographical knowledge, encoded in our next artifacts that shouldn't exist for thousands of years. A 1513 map shows Antarctica's coastline without ice, details that wouldn't be discovered until radar penetrated miles of ice in 1949. Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis was a cartographer as well as a naval commander. In 1513, working in Constantinople, he compiled a world map drawing on source materials from the Imperial Library, Arabic maps, Portuguese charts captured from enemy vessels, and, according to his own notation, ancient maps dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. The result was a masterwork of 16th century cartography, showing the Atlantic Ocean, the coasts of Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The map was rediscovered in 1929 in the Topkapi Palace archives. For decades it was studied as an interesting example of Ottoman cartographic knowledge, notable for its early depiction of South America, but not considered particularly revolutionary. Then researchers began examining the southern portion of the map more carefully. The Piri Reis map shows a coastline extending south from the eastern coast of South America. The conventional interpretation labeled this as a confused representation of South America. Southern tip, perhaps Argentina or Patagonia, distorted by cartographic projection issues or imperfect source materials. But in the 1960s, Professor Charles Hapgood conducted a detailed analysis using trigonometric projection and found something unsettling. The coastline matched Antarctica, not Antarctica as we know it, a frozen continent buried under miles of ice, but Antarctica as it would appear without ice. The mountains, bays and coastal features shown on the pre-Sumerian map correspond remarkably well to subglacial topography mapped by seismic surveys in the 1950s and refined by modern ice penetrating radar. The map shows details of Antarctica's true bedrock coastline that wouldn't be discovered until scientists developed technology to see through ice sheets averaging over a mile thick. This creates an impossible chronology. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820 by Russian explorers. Its coastline wasn't fully mapped until the 20th century, and its subglacial topography, the actual shape of the land beneath the ice, remained unknown until seismic and radar surveys revealed it in recent decades. Yet a 1513 map shows these features. Piri Reis himself couldn't have surveyed Antarctica. It was frozen, undiscovered, and thousands of miles from Ottoman naval operations. He clearly states he is copying from ancient source maps. But who created those source maps? And when? Geological evidence suggests Antarctica has been frozen for at least 6,000 years, with some estimates extending the ice sheet's age to millions of years. For a map to show Antarctica's ice-free coastline, it must have been created either before the ice formed or using technology capable of penetrating ice. Neither possibility fits conventional historical chronology. Professor Hapgood, whose analysis even impressed Albert Einstein enough to write a foreword to one of Hapgood's books, proposed that the source maps dated to a warm period before Antarctica froze, possibly during the last interglacial period or even earlier. This would require a seafaring civilization capable of global exploration and sophisticated cartography, existing tens of thousands of years ago, before any recognized civilization in conventional history. Skeptics argue that the correlation between the Piri Reis map and Antarctica is coincidental, that the coastline actually represents South America and any similarity to Antarctica is the result of pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist. They note that the map's orientation and projection make definitive identification difficult, but cartographic experts who analyzed the map's geometry find the Antarctic interpretation compelling. The coastline details, when properly projected, align too well with subglacial features to be easily dismissed. The map shows river valleys and mountain ranges in positions corresponding to Antarctic topography, revealed only by modern technology. Museums rarely feature the Piri Reis map in exhibitions, despite its historical importance as an early depiction of the Americas. When displayed, explanatory materials focus on its Ottoman origins and early mapping of the New World, avoiding discussion of the Antarctic controversy entirely. The Piri Reis map suggests ancient mariners charted Antarctica before it froze, but Antarctica isn't the only geographical mystery recorded in impossible maps. Our next artifact reveals knowledge of an entire continent that officially didn't exist. 30 years before Antarctica was discovered, a French mapmaker drew its rivers and mountains, features buried under ice for 6,000 years. If the Piri Reis map were an isolated anomaly, it could be dismissed as lucky coincidence or misinterpretation. But in 1531, French cartographer Orontius Phineas created a world map that shows Antarctica in even more startling detail. The Phineas map depicts a large southern continent, labelled Terra Australis, roughly centred on the South Pole. The shape, proportions and geographical features correspond surprisingly well to Antarctica's actual configuration. The continent shows mountain ranges, interior valleys, and coastal features in positions that match the subglacial topography discovered centuries later. Critically, the map shows Antarctica as two distinct landmasses separated by a channel. The Transantarctic mountain range that divides East Antarctica from West Antarctica. Modern geologists discovered this division only in the 1950s through seismic surveys that revealed a massive rift valley beneath the ice, separating the continent into two geological sections. Yet Phineas's map, created 420 years earlier, shows this division clearly. The map also depicts river systems flowing from Antarctica's interior to the coast. Subglacial mapping has confirmed the existence of ancient river valleys beneath the ice. Dry channels carved when Antarctica was warmer and wetter before glaciation buried them. These river patterns on Phineas' 16th century map match the drainage systems scientists discovered using ice, penetrating radar, and satellite gravity mapping. The conventional explanation struggles here. Skeptics argue that Terra Australis was a hypothetical continent. Mapmakers assumed a large southern landmass must exist to balance the continents in the northern hemisphere. They simply drew a speculative continent in the south, and some features coincidentally resemble Antarctica. But this explanation doesn't account for the specific accuracy. A speculative continent could be any shape, any size, any configuration. Yet Phineas draws a continent that matches Antarctica's actual proportions, shows the division between East and West Antarctica, and includes interior features that correspond to subglacial topography. That is a remarkable series of lucky guesses. Professor Charles Hapgood, analysing both the Piri-Reis and Phineas maps along with other medieval and Renaissance cartography, proposed that these maps preserve information from a much older source, a sophisticated cartographic tradition predating known civilization. He suggested that these source maps were created by an advanced maritime culture during a warmer climate period when Antarctica was partially or entirely ice-free. The hypothesis requires accepting that a civilization capable of global exploration and precise cartography existed during the late Pleistocene, between 15,000 and 6,000 years ago. During the transition from the last ice age to the current interglacial period, this civilization would have had ships capable of reaching Antarctica, surveying equipment accurate enough to map coastlines, and some method of recording and preserving geographical information across millennia. No archaeological evidence of such a civilization has been found. No cities, no tools, no artifacts. This is the primary objection to Hapgood's hypothesis. Where is the civilization that created these maps? How could a culture advanced enough for global maritime exploration leave no trace? One possible answer: rising sea levels. During the last glacial maximum 20,000 years ago, sea levels were 400 feet lower than today. Vast coastal plains that would have been prime territory for human settlement are now underwater. If a maritime civilization existed, it would have built ports and cities on coasts that are now submerged. Their inland settlements would be rare. Maritime cultures live near the sea. Another answer: catastrophe. Multiple lines of geological evidence point to dramatic climate disruptions around 10,800 BCE, rapid warming, massive flooding, and possible cosmic impact. A coastal civilization could have been largely destroyed, with survivors scattering to different regions and preserving fragments of knowledge that appear in later cultures as anomalously advanced cartography. The Phineas map sits in collections like the Library of Congress, occasionally reproduced in books about cartographic history, but its implications are rarely discussed in mainstream historical contexts. It is presented as an example of Renaissance cartography, interesting for its speculative southern continent, without serious engagement with how Phineas managed to speculatively draw Antarctica so accurately. Maps suggesting ice-free Antarctica point to an ancient maritime civilization, but maritime exploration requires astronomical navigation, knowledge encoded in our next artifact with impossible precision. Medieval mapmakers drew coastlines they never seen with accuracy that wouldn't be verified for centuries. They claimed they were copying ancient maps. The Piri-Reis and Phineas maps aren't isolated cases. A broader pattern emerges when examining medieval and Renaissance cartography. Maps showing geographical knowledge their creators shouldn't possess, often with notation stating they recopied from more ancient sources. The Zeno map, published in 1380, depicts Greenland without its ice sheet. Like Antarctica, Greenland is buried under ice, in some places over 2 miles thick. Yet the Zeno map shows Greenland as an archipelago of islands, separated by channels, matching the subglacial topography that modern surveys have revealed beneath the ice. How did 14th century cartographers know that Greenland isn't a single landmass, but multiple islands held together by ice? The Philippe Buache map of 1737 shows Antarctica divided by a waterway running across the continent. The subglacial Rift Valley, discovered in the 1950s. Buache explicitly states in his annotations that he is working from much older source materials. He shows Antarctica 83 years before it was officially discovered, including interior features invisible beneath the ice. The Dulcet Portolano of 1339, a Mediterranean nautical chart, shows distances and bearings with accuracy requiring precise longitude calculation, supposedly impossible before John Harrison's marine chronometer in 1761. The map's mathematical precision exceeds what should be achievable through dead reckoning and astronomical observation alone. The coastal details are accurate to within miles, suggesting survey level mapping rather than approximations based on sailors' reports. These maps share common characteristics. First, they often explicitly reference ancient source materials, copied from old charts, based on ancient maps, compiled from Arab and Greek sources. Second, they show geographical accuracy that exceeds the cartographic capabilities of their nominal creation dates. Third, they use projection methods and mathematical conventions that don't match contemporary European cartography, suggesting they're recopying from traditions using different techniques. The Portolan charts, medieval nautical maps of the Mediterranean and Black Sea, are particularly mysterious. They appear suddenly in the 13th century with no apparent developmental history. Earlier maps are crude and symbolic. Then Portolans emerge showing coastlines with modern accuracy, using sophisticated projection methods and including precise compass, roses and distance scales. They show no evolution from simpler to complex. They appear fully mature as if copying from an already sophisticated tradition. Mainstream cartographic historians acknowledge the Portolan mystery, but attribute it to lost or undocumented developments in Arab or Byzantine cartography. Perhaps sophisticated mapping techniques existed, but weren't preserved in surviving historical records. This is possible. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but the cumulative weight of anomalous maps creates a pattern. When Piri shows Antarctica, when Phineas shows Antarctica, interior, when Zeno shows subglacial Greenland, when Buash shows Antarctic rifts, when Dulcet shows precision longitude, and when all these cartographers reference ancient sources, the pattern suggests something more than coincidence or lucky guesses. Either medieval and Renaissance cartographers were fantastically lucky in their speculative geography, consistently guessing features that happened to match reality as discovered centuries later by modern technology, or they were copying from source maps created by a culture with cartographic capabilities we don't associate with the ancient world. Museums occasionally display these maps in exhibitions about cartographic history or the age of exploration, but they represented as interesting historical artifacts, examples of evolving geographical knowledge rather than as evidence of anomalous ancient capabilities. The accuracy of their unknown or impossible details is downplayed or ignored in favor of discussions about artistic style, the development of projection techniques, or the political contexts of their creation. The maps exist. The accuracy is measurable, the coincidences keep accumulating, and the question remains, who mapped the world with such precision in antiquity, and why has their civilization left so little trace? Ancient maps suggest a lost civilization with global reach, but global exploration requires more than navigation. It requires architectural and engineering marvels that our next artifacts demonstrate existed thousands of years before they should have. In Bolivia, 130-ton stone blocks fit together with precision measured in fractions of millimeters, carved by people who supposedly had no metal tools. 13,000 feet above sea level in the Bolivian Altiplano, the ruins of Pumapunku sit abandoned and inexplicable. The site is part of the larger Tiwanaku archaeological complex, dated to approximately 500 to 600 CE, though some researchers argue for much older origins. What remains at Pumapunku are scattered megalithic stone blocks, some weighing over 130 tons, carved with precision that challenges every assumption about the capabilities of pre-Columbian American civilizations. The blocks are made of andesite and red sandstone, materials quarried miles away and transported across difficult terrain to this high-altitude site. But it is not their size or transportation that creates the real mystery. It is how they were cut. Many blocks show H-shaped profiles, perfectly flat surfaces, and interlocking joints that fit together with minimal gaps. The precision is measurable, surfaces flat to within fractions of an inch across several feet, right angles accurate to within a degree, and holes drilled with such uniformity they appear machine-made. Some blocks have complex geometric cutting, channels, recesses, and protrusions that interlock with other blocks like massive stone Lego pieces. Engineer Christopher Dunn and others have documented characteristics suggesting machine tooling. Parallel drill, marks indicating rapid, consistent rotation, perfectly flat surfaces across materials of varying hardness, which hand grinding would struggle to achieve uniformly, and holes with cylindrical walls and flat bottoms, characteristics of modern core drilling rather than pecking or hand boring. The conventional archaeological explanation attributes the precision to patient hand work using stone hammers and copper or bronze chisels. Experimental archaeology has shown that these tools can shape stone, but achieving the documented precision requires not just skill, but superhuman consistency. Modern stonemasons using hand tools produce work that shows inevitable irregularities, slight curves in supposedly flat surfaces, minor deviations in angles, variations in channel depth. The Puma Punku blocks show none of these characteristics. The mystery deepens when considering the materials. Andesite is a volcanic stone rating, approximately 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, hard enough that copper tools rating 3 should be unable to cut it effectively. The standard response invokes abrasive slurry, using rope or bronze saws with sand to abrade through stone. This works for rough cutting but struggles to explain the precision. Some blocks show evidence of having been assembled and then disassembled. Precise interlocking joints that were clearly designed for modular construction. Why would builders create such sophisticated joinery if they were simply stacking stones for a permanent structure? The modularity suggests the ability to assemble, disassemble, and reassemble the structure. An engineering sophistication, unexpected from a culture we classify as pre-industrial. Perhaps most mysteriously, the site appears unfinished. Blocks lie scattered as if construction was suddenly abandoned. Some are partially carved, others completed but never incorporated into structures. There is no evidence of gradual decline or invasion, just abandonment, as if the builders left mid-project and never returned. Local indigenous legends offer a different timeline. According to Aymara traditions, Puma Punku wasn't built by the Tiwanaku culture at all, but existed long before, created by gods in a single night. When Spanish chroniclers arrived in the 16th century, they reported that local people had no memory of the site's construction. It was already ancient, already abandoned, its origins forgotten. Modern dating of Puma Punku relies on pottery and organic materials found in association with the stones, placing construction around 500 to 600 CE. But what if the stones themselves are older, and later cultures simply occupied or attempted to use an already ancient site? This would explain the precision mystery. The blocks weren't created with primitive tools by the Tiwanaku culture, but inherited from an earlier, more sophisticated civilization. Museums displaying Tiwanaku artifacts typically focus on pottery, textiles, and smaller objects, portable items that showcase artistic skill without raising uncomfortable technical questions. The Puma Punku megalith precision is rarely emphasized. When displayed, the stones are presented as impressive but achievable examples of pre-Columbian engineering, with explanations emphasizing patient manual labor and cultural dedication rather than engaging with the measurable precision that challenges those explanations. The blocks exist, the precision is documented, the conventional tools can explain it, and the mystery of who carved these massive stones with such accuracy, and why, remains unsolved. Precision stonework in Bolivia suggests lost construction technology, but Puma Punku isn't isolated. Similar precision appears on the other side of the world in Egypt, where our next artifacts demonstrate capabilities that conventional chronology can explain. Deep beneath Saqqara, granite boxes weighing 100 tons each are carved with precision that modern machinists can barely achieve, supposedly using copper chisels. Beneath the desert at Saqqara, south of Cairo, tunnels extend into bedrock, dark passageways carved from solid limestone, leading to chambers containing some of ancient Egypt's most inexplicable artifacts. These are the galleries of the Serapeum, discovered by French archaeologist Auguste Mariette in 1850. What he found inside defied explanation then, and continues to perplex engineers today. 24 massive granite boxes, each carved from a single piece of Aswan granite. They are enormous, approximately 13 feet long, 7.5 feet wide, and 11 feet tall. with walls up to 18 inches thick. Each box weighs between 70 and 100 tons. The lids weigh an additional 30 tons. But it is not the size that creates the mystery, it is the precision. Engineer Christopher Dunn conducted detailed measurements of these boxes using precision instruments, straight edges, laser levels, and coordinate measuring machines. His findings are startling. The internal corners of the boxes are right angles, 90.00 degrees, precise to within thousandths of a degree. The internal surfaces are flat to within 0.000.2 inches across several feet, a tolerance approaching modern machining standards. The opposing internal faces are parallel within similar tolerances. The external surfaces show less precision, but the internal work demonstrates capabilities that shouldn't exist in ancient Egypt. Creating this precision in granite is extraordinarily difficult, even with modern tools. Granite is one of the hardest natural stones, composed of quartz, hardness 7, feldspar, hardness 6, and mica. Modern stone working uses diamond, tipped saws, carbide, tipped drills, and precision grinding wheels, all powered by electric motors providing consistent pressure and rotation speeds. Even with these tools, achieving the tolerances documented in the Serapeum boxes requires skilled operators and careful quality control. The ancient Egyptians supposedly had copper chisels, bronze saws, and diorite hammerstones. These tools can shape granite. Experimental archaeology has proven it is possible. But the precision achieved in the Serapeum boxes exceeds what manual tooling can produce. Hand work inevitably creates slight irregularities. The Serapeum boxes show none. The official explanation identifies these as sarcophagi, burial containers for sacred Apis bulls, worshipped in Memphis as manifestations of the god Ptah. Hieroglyphic inscriptions in the galleries reference Apis bull burials during the Ptolemaic period, 664 to 30 BCE. Therefore, mainstream Egyptology dates the Serapeum to this period. But problems emerge with this explanation. No bull mummies were ever found inside the boxes. Only a few fragments of bone, likely placed there later. The boxes show no decorations, no hieroglyphics carved into the granite itself. Strange for Egyptian burial objects, which are typically covered with protective spells and religious imagery. And most troubling, the precision serves no burial function. Why create tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch for a box that is just going to hold a dead bull? Some researchers propose the boxes weren't created as burial containers, but served some other purpose, possibly scientific or technological, and were later repurposed by the Ptolemaic Egyptians for religious use. This would explain why the surrounding tunnels and inscriptions date to the Ptolemaic period, while the boxes themselves might be much older. The precision suggests functional requirements. When you machine something to exacting tolerances, you are usually creating components that need to fit together precisely or maintain specific internal dimensions for some operational purpose. What purpose required 100-ton granite boxes with flat, parallel internal surfaces, accurate to a fraction of a millimeter? Theories range from resonance chambers. The granite boxes might have acoustic properties, to liquid storage. Precisely parallel surfaces allow accurate volume measurements. To unknown technological functions we can reconstruct. None are definitively proven. What is certain is that the precision exists, it is measurable, and conventional Egyptology doesn't explain it adequately. Transporting these massive boxes into the Serapeum raises additional questions. The tunnels are barely wide enough to accommodate them. They must have been lowered through vertical shafts or maneuvered through passages with minimal clearance. A logistical challenge that would strain modern equipment. How did ancient Egyptians move 100-ton boxes with such precision that they didn't damage the delicate internal surfaces during transport? Museums rarely discuss the Serapeum in public exhibits. Images of the boxes occasionally appear in books about ancient Egypt, but the precision specifications are almost never mentioned. The artifacts are acknowledged as impressive, but treated as minor curiosities, rather than evidence challenging our understanding of ancient Egyptian capabilities. The boxes remain in the Serapeum, dark and silent, their purpose forgotten, their precision unexplained. Monuments to capabilities we don't understand and tools we've never found. Precision granite boxes in Egypt point to advanced stone working technology, but precision cutting is one challenge. Moving and positioning massive stones is another. Our next artifacts demonstrate construction capabilities that defy both ancient and modern engineering. 3 stones at Baalbek weigh 800 tons each. Modern cranes can lift them, yet they were placed precisely 20 feet above ground, thousands of years ago. In the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon, the Roman Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek stands as a testament to imperial grandeur. Massive Corinthian columns soar above the valley floor. Elaborately carved friezes show Roman gods and mythological scenes. The temple is magnificent, a showcase of Roman engineering at its height during the 1st through 3rd centuries CE. But the temple sits on a foundation that the Romans didn't build, and possibly could have built. The foundation consists of massive limestone blocks, including 3 enormous stones known as the trilithon. Each stone measures approximately 62 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet thick. Each weighs approximately 800 tons, 1.6 million pounds. They sit roughly 20 feet above ground level in the foundation's upper courses, fitted together with precision that allows no gaps. To appreciate the scale, modern heavy lifting cranes can handle about 500 to 600 tons under ideal conditions. On flat, stable ground with extensive engineering support, the Liber LTM 11200-9.1, one of the world's largest mobile cranes, maxes out around 1,200 tons, but requires counterweights, outriggers, and perfect ground conditions. Even this modern engineering marvel would struggle to lift and precisely position the trilithon stones on uneven terrain 20 feet in the air. Yet there they sit, placed over 2,000 years ago, possibly much longer, depending on their true age. The mystery deepens at the nearby quarry, where 3 additional stones remain partially cut from bedrock. The largest, called the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, Hajar el-Hibla, weighs approximately 1,000 tons. Another recently discovered stone, still attached to bedrock, may weigh 1,650 tons, potentially the largest workstone in human history. These stones were clearly being prepared for the same construction project as the trilithon. Whoever was building with 800-ton blocks was apparently planning to use even larger ones. Then the work stopped. The quarried stones remain on site, abandoned as if the builders disappeared mid-project. The Romans who constructed the Temple of Jupiter documented their building activities extensively. They left inscriptions commemorating emperors, recording construction dates, and celebrating the temple's completion. But nowhere in Roman records is there any mention of moving these foundation stones. The Romans built upon this foundation, they didn't create it. Historical accounts suggest the Romans themselves didn't know who built the foundation. The historian Ammianus Marcellinus, writing in the 4th century CE, describes Baalbek as a place whose foundations were laid in remote antiquity. Arab historians later attributed the construction to giants or ancient kings possessing divine powers. So if the Romans didn't move these stones, who did, and how? Various theories have been proposed. Engineer Jean-Pierre Adam calculated that moving 1 trilithon stone using ancient methods would require 40,000 workers pulling simultaneously on ropes, assuming perfect coordination and ideal conditions. The logistics are staggering, organizing 40,000 people to pull together, ensuring ropes don't break, maneuvering the stone along a path without hitting obstacles, and then positioning it precisely 20 feet up in the foundation course. Some researchers suggest hydraulic systems, using water pressure to lift stones, but no evidence of such technology exists at Baalbek, and the engineering required to hydraulically lift 800 tons would itself be remarkable. Others propose lost techniques using leverage and counterweights, but scaling such methods to handle stones of this mass remains purely theoretical. Acoustic levitation, using sound waves to reduce effective weight, has been proposed by fringe theorists, but this strays into pseudoscience without physical evidence or plausible ancient technology capable of generating the required acoustic power. The stones themselves remain. They are not mythological. You can visit them, touch them, measure them. They repositioned with precision despite their mass, and no one has a convincing explanation for how they got there. Museums displaying Roman architecture typically focus on columns, capitals, and carved reliefs, portable elements showcasing artistic skill. The Baalbek Foundation is mentioned in archaeological texts, but rarely explored in depth. The trilithon represents an uncomfortable question that conventional archaeology doesn't answer. If the Romans didn't move these stones, And we can move them with modern equipment. Who did? Massive stones moved and positioned with impossible precision suggest lost engineering knowledge, but these architectural marvels required more than just muscle power. They required astronomical and mathematical knowledge encoded in structures we only now beginning to understand. Ancient Egyptians encoded a 26,000-year astronomical cycle in their temples, a cycle modern science didn't discover until the 1800s. Precession is one of astronomy's most subtle phenomena. Earth's axis wobbles like a spinning top, completing one full cycle every 25,920 years, called the Great Year or Platonic Year. This wobble causes the position of stars to gradually shift over centuries. The pole star changes. Constellations appear in different positions at the spring equinox. It is an incredibly slow drift, noticeable only across generations of careful observation. Modern astronomy credits the Greek astronomer Hipparchus with discovering precession in the 2nd century BCE, when he compared his star measurements with records from 150 years earlier, and noticed the positions had shifted slightly. This is the official discovery date taught in every astronomy textbook. But mounting evidence suggests that ancient civilizations understood precession much earlier, and encoded this knowledge in their monuments and mythology. The Dendera zodiac, a ceiling relief from the Temple of Hathor in Egypt, shows the night sky with star positions that match any historical period Egypt existed. When astronomers calculate what the sky looked like at different times in the past, the Dendera positions correspond to approximately 10,500 BCE, roughly 12,500 years ago. For the Egyptians to carve star positions from 10,500 BCE, they would need either records preserved from that period or sophisticated understanding of precession, allowing them to calculate historical star positions mathematically. Researcher Graham Hancock has documented multiple ancient structures aligned not to contemporary star positions but to historical ones. The Sphinx facing due east looks directly at the constellation Leo during the spring equinox around 10,500 BCE, creating perfect sky-ground correlation with its lion body. The 3 pyramids of Giza align with Orion's belt as it appeared around 10,500 BCE, not as it appeared when the pyramids were conventionally dated 2500 BCE. Angkor Wat in Cambodia shows alignments to the constellation Draco as it appeared around 10,500 BCE. Why 10,500 BCE specifically? This date keeps appearing in various astronomical alignments, suggesting it held significance for ancient builders, possibly commemorating some important event, or perhaps indicating when an earlier civilization existed that later cultures memorialized in their monuments. Understanding precession requires centuries of continuous astronomical observation. The drift is too slow to notice in a single lifetime. You need generations of astronomers carefully measuring star positions, recording them accurately, and comparing measurements across centuries to detect the gradual shift. This implies stable, literate civilizations maintaining long-term scientific programs. Hardly the profile of Stone Age hunter gatherers supposedly populating Earth in 10,500 BCE. The Sirius mystery adds another layer. Ancient Egyptian texts demonstrate detailed knowledge of Sirius's cycles, including references to what modern astronomers interpret as Sirius B, a white dwarf star orbiting Sirius A with a 50-year period. Sirius B is invisible to the naked eye, only discovered by modern telescopes in 1862. How did ancient Egyptians know about it? The Dogon people of Mali possess even more detailed knowledge of Sirius B in their traditional astronomy and mythology. They describe its orbit, its density. White dwarf stars are extraordinarily dense, and its 50-year cycle, all accurate according to modern astronomy. French anthropologists who studied Dogon traditions in the 1930s and 40s were bewildered by this knowledge. The Dogon claim it was taught to them by visitors in ancient times, a statement that has launched 1,000 fringe theories but doesn't change the accuracy of their astronomical knowledge. Mainstream Egyptology generally dismisses precessional alignments as coincidental. When a monument aligns with historical star positions, it is argued that we're reading too much into it, the alignment is accidental, or our dating is off, or ancient builders weren't thinking about precession at all. But the pattern keeps appearing. Multiple monuments across multiple cultures showing the same historical astronomical alignments. The same date, 10,500 BCE, appearing repeatedly, and knowledge of astronomical phenomena that shouldn't be observable without telescopes. Either this is an extraordinary series of coincidences, or ancient civilizations possessed astronomical sophistication. We don't officially recognize. Knowledge that implies centuries of observation, mathematical skill, and possibly inheritance from even earlier cultures. Processional knowledge in prehistory suggests sophisticated astronomical observation. But observation requires recording, mathematical and calendrical systems that our next artifacts prove existed with startling complexity in the ancient world. In 1600 BCE, Bronze Age Germans created a star map so accurate it shows the exact solstice angles for their latitude. 1,000 years before written astronomy, the Nebra sky disk is a bronze disk, about 12 inches in diameter, adorned with gold symbols depicting the cosmos. It was discovered in 1999 by looters using a metal detector in Saxony, Anhalt, Germany, and subsequently recovered by archaeologists. Authenticated through multiple scientific analyses, including examination of the bronze, mineral composition, patina formation, and manufacturing techniques, the disk dates to approximately 1600 BCE, making it the oldest known realistic depiction of the night sky. The astronomical information encoded in the disk is remarkable. Gold symbols show the sun, or full moon, a crescent moon, and 32 stars including a cluster of 7 that clearly represents the Pleiades constellation. 2 arcs along the disk, S-edge mark specific angles, 82.5 degrees, which corresponds exactly to the angular span between summer and winter solstice sunrises at the latitude where the disk was found, 51 Phi. This is sophisticated observational astronomy. The Bronze Age people who created this disk weren't simply observing the night sky casually. They were conducting precise measurements of solar cycles, tracking solstices, and recording this information in permanent form. They understood that the sun's rising and setting positions change throughout the year following a regular cycle, and they knew the exact angles those changes span at their specific latitude. The disk shows evidence of modification over time. Symbols were added in different phases, suggesting it remained in use for generations, continually updated with new astronomical knowledge. Later additions include a solar boat arc at the bottom, possibly representing the sun's journey across the sky, and additional decorative elements. This implies the disk was a valued object passed down through generations as both practical tool and sacred artifact. But here is what makes this artifact chronologically problematic. It predates written astronomical texts in Europe by over 1,000 years. The ancient Greeks, credited with developing systematic astronomy, wouldn't begin their observations until around 500 BCE, more than a millennium after the Nebra disk was created. Yet Bronze Age Germans in 1600 BCE already possessed practical astronomical knowledge, sufficient to track solstices and create accurate star maps. This challenges narratives about Bronze Age Europeans as primitive barbarians who learned civilization from more advanced Mediterranean cultures. The Nebra disk proves that sophisticated scientific observation was happening in Central Europe independently, contemporaneously with, or even preceding, early Greek astronomical work. The Pleiades cluster's prominence on the disk is particularly interesting. This constellation appears in the mythology and astronomy of cultures worldwide, from ancient Greece to the Maya to Aboriginal Australians. Its agricultural significance, the Pleiades' heliacal rising often marked planting seasons, meant many cultures tracked it carefully. But the Nebra disk's inclusion of precise solstice angles alongside the Pleiades suggests something more sophisticated than agricultural calendars. This is mathematical astronomy. Museums initially hesitated to display the Nebra disk prominently. Its discovery through looting, rather than controlled excavation, raised authenticity questions. Some scholars argued it might be a later forgery. However, extensive scientific testing, including radiocarbon dating of organic material, adhering to the bronze, analysis of copper impurities, matching Bronze Age sources, and examination of ancient tool marks, confirmed its authenticity. Today, the disk is displayed in the State Museum of Prehistory in Halle, Germany, but its broader implications for understanding Bronze Age European astronomy are rarely emphasized in mainstream archaeological narratives. It is presented as an impressive artifact showcasing ancient artistic skill, with less emphasis on the sophisticated astronomical knowledge it demonstrates. The Nebra sky disk stands as evidence that European Bronze Age cultures possessed scientific capabilities we don't typically associate with pre-classical peoples: careful observation, mathematical precision, and long-term astronomical tracking, all demonstrated over 1,000 years before written astronomy supposedly began. Bronze Age astronomical knowledge in Europe reveals sophisticated observation, but Europe isn't unique. Across the world, ancient cultures encoded complex mathematical and astronomical knowledge in monuments and artifacts that challenge our understanding of their capabilities. The Maya calculated the solar year to within 17 seconds of modern precision without telescopes, and invented the concept of zero independently. When Spanish conquistadors reached the Yucatan Peninsula in the 16th century, they encountered civilizations using calendars more accurate than Europe's. The Mayan solar year calculation, 365.242 days, differs from modern measurements, 365.2422 days, by only 17 seconds annually. They achieved this precision through naked eye observation, careful record keeping across generations, and sophisticated mathematical analysis. The Mayan calendar system is extraordinarily complex, operating multiple simultaneous cycles. The Tzolk'in is a 260-day ritual calendar. The Hayab is a 365-day solar calendar. These mesh together in a 52-year calendar round. But the Maya also used the long count, an absolute dating system measuring time from a mythological creation date in 3114 BCE, counting days forward through increasingly larger units: kins, days, annals, 20 days, tons, 360 days, katans, 7,200 days, and backtons, 144,000 days. The long count demonstrates conceptual sophistication beyond simple time tracking. It represents time linearly rather than cyclically, extending backwards and forwards across millennia. Mayan astronomers could calculate dates millions of years in the past or future with mathematical consistency. This requires not just observational astronomy, but abstract mathematical thinking. The ability to manipulate numbers representing time scales far exceeding human lifespans. Central to this mathematical system is the concept of zero, not merely as a placeholder, but as a true mathematical zero, representing absence or null value. The Maya developed this concept independently of Old World mathematics, possibly earlier than its development in India, traditionally credited with inventing zero around 500 CE, though recent evidence suggests earlier use. The Mayan zero appears in inscriptions dating to the early centuries CE, demonstrating that American civilizations achieved this mathematical breakthrough without influence from Eastern mathematics. Zero is not an obvious invention. Many sophisticated ancient civilizations, including Rome and Greece, never developed it. Zero requires abstract thinking, recognizing that nothing can be treated as a quantity, that absence has mathematical properties. The Maya didn't just stumble upon zero. They integrated it into their base -20 vigesimal number system, using it for astronomical calculations of remarkable complexity. The Venus table in the Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving Mayan books. Spanish conquistadors and missionaries destroyed most Mayan texts. Considering them pagan, calculates Venus' synodic period, the time between successive appearances in the same position relative to the Sun, as 584 days. Modern astronomy measures it as 583.92 days. The Maya achieved this precision by tracking Venus over centuries, averaging out the variations in its apparent motion, and developing correction factors to maintain accuracy. They applied similar precision to eclipse predictions, lunar cycles, and the movements of other planets. The astronomical tables surviving in Mayan codices represent centuries of accumulated observations, requiring institutional continuity. Temples or schools, where knowledge was preserved, taught, and refined across generations. The chronological problem is subtle but significant. This level of mathematical and astronomical sophistication requires long-term civilizational stability. The classic Maya period, 250 to 900 CE, is well documented, but their astronomical knowledge likely extends back much further. The long count calendar, beginning in 3114 BCE suggests either that this date held mythological significance or that Mayan astronomy inherited knowledge from earlier, unknown Mesoamerican cultures. The Spanish destruction of Mayan books represents an incalculable loss. Bishop Diego de Landa oversaw mass burnings of Mayan codices in the 1560s, claiming they contained lies of the devil. We'll never know what additional astronomical, mathematical, or historical knowledge was destroyed. The 4 surviving codices are fragments, precious, but incomplete windows into Mayan scientific achievement. Museums display Mayan artifacts, elaborate ceramics, jade carvings, monumental stelae covered with glyphs, but often present them as artistic rather than scientific achievements. The mathematical sophistication, astronomical precision, and conceptual breakthroughs, like the independent invention of zero, are acknowledged but rarely emphasized as evidence that pre-Columbian American civilizations achieved scientific capabilities rivaling Old World cultures. The Maya weren't primitive peoples practicing crude superstition. They were sophisticated mathematicians and astronomers whose observations and calculations would remain unmatched in Europe until the Renaissance, and whose calendrical systems were, in some respects, more accurate than those used by their European conquerors. Mayan astronomical precision demonstrates sophisticated science in pre-Columbian America, but astronomy and mathematics address the cosmos. Our next artifacts suggest ancient civilizations also possessed unexpected knowledge about the Earth itself, including geographical awareness that shouldn't exist. In 1992, scientists found cocaine in 3,000-year-old Egyptian mummies. Cocaine comes from South America. Egyptians supposedly never crossed the Atlantic. The year was 1992, and German toxicologist Dr. Svetlana Balabanova was conducting routine analysis on Egyptian mummies at the Munich Museum. The tests were standard procedure, screening for various substances to understand ancient Egyptian health, diet, and possible medicinal practices. What she found shouldn't have been possible: cocaine, nicotine, and tobacco alkaloids. These substances appear exclusively in New World plants. Cocaine derives from coca leaves native to South America. Tobacco is indigenous to the Americas. Neither plant existed in Africa, Europe, or Asia before Columbus. This is botanical fact confirmed by countless studies. Yet Balabanova's tests showed these compounds in the hair, soft tissue, and bone of ancient Egyptian mummies, including Henotwe, a priestess who died around 1000 BCE, roughly 2,500 years before Columbus sailed. The initial response was disbelief and accusation. Contamination, critics said. Perhaps museum workers who smoked tobacco handled the mummies. Perhaps the samples were compromised. Perhaps the testing equipment was flawed. Balabanova repeated the tests. Then other laboratories repeated them independently. They tested mummies that had been sealed, never opened in modern times. They took samples from deep within bone cavities where external contamination could reach. The results held cocaine, nicotine, in multiple mummies, in concentrations suggesting consumption during life, not post-mortem contamination. The implications are staggering. Either New World crops reached Egypt thousands of years before Columbus, or the testing is somehow systematically flawed in ways multiple laboratories haven't identified, or there are Old World plants producing identical alkaloids that we've never discovered, despite centuries of botanical research. Mainstream Egyptology has largely ignored these findings. The silence is deafening. Major Egyptology journals haven't published extensive analyses. Museum exhibitions about ancient Egyptian life never mention the cocaine findings. Textbooks discussing Egyptian medicine, diet, and trade don't address the biochemical evidence of American crops. Why the silence? Because the findings create impossible questions. If cocaine and tobacco reached Egypt, how? Transatlantic voyages in papyrus boats, regular trade routes we don't know about, ancient mariners sailing back and forth between continents for millennia, leaving no archaeological trace beyond chemical residues in mummies. Thor Heyerdahl, the Norwegian explorer, attempted to answer these questions practically. In 1970 he built Ratheken, a papyrus reed boat constructed using ancient Egyptian techniques, and sailed it across the Atlantic from Morocco to Barbados. The journey took 57 days and proved that Egyptian style vessels could physically make the crossing. It doesn't prove they did, but it demonstrates the possibility. Supporting evidence appears in Egyptian art, though it is hotly disputed. Some temple reliefs show plants that researchers have identified as possibly representing corn, maize, or pineapples, both New World crops. Skeptics argue these are stylized representations of native African plants that coincidentally resemble American species. The debate remains unresolved. Similar anomalies appear worldwide. Chickens, domesticated in Southeast Asia, appear in pre-Columbian South American art and bone deposits, suggesting trans-Pacific contact before European arrival. Sweet potatoes, native to South America, were cultivated in Polynesia before European contact, indicating either that Polynesians reached South America or South Americans reached Polynesia in prehistoric times. Recent genetic studies of Polynesian populations have found Native American DNA admixture dating to around 1200 CE, confirming that contact occurred. But the cocaine findings suggest something more systematic than isolated voyages. They suggest regular enough contact that New World crops became part of Egyptian culture, used in religious ceremonies or medicine, frequently enough to leave biochemical traces in multiple individuals across different time periods. The alternative explanations grow increasingly strained. Perhaps unknown African plants produce similar alkaloids but have since gone extinct. Perhaps the biochemical signatures we interpret as cocaine and nicotine are actually different compounds that testing methods mistake for those substances. Perhaps the preservation process or burial environment created these compounds through unknown chemical reactions. Each alternative requires special pleading, proposing lost plants, flawed testing protocols, or unknown chemistry to avoid the simpler explanation that ancient people crossed oceans we assume were uncrossable, establishing trade networks we don't recognize, connecting civilizations we believe were isolated. The cocaine evidence sits in scientific papers, largely unaddressed by mainstream archaeology. Museums don't discuss it. Tour guides in Egyptian exhibits don't mention it. The mummies remain on display, their chemical secrets hidden inside tissues that most visitors never think to question. But the evidence exists. Multiple laboratories, multiple mummies, consistent findings, and no satisfactory explanation that fits conventional historical narratives about isolated ancient civilizations. Chemical evidence of transoceanic contact suggests ancient global trade networks, but trade requires navigation, and our next artifacts demonstrate astronomical and geographical knowledge that implies ancient mariners charted the world far earlier than recognized. Massive 3,000-year-old stone heads in Mexico show what many describe as African features. 1,500 years before Columbus crossed the Atlantic. Along Mexico's Gulf Coast, in the sweltering jungles where the Olmec civilization flourished from approximately 1200 to 400 BCE, 17 colossal stone heads sit as silent witnesses to an ancient mystery. Each weighs between 6 and 50 tons. Each is carved from a single basalt boulder, and each displays facial features that have sparked decades of controversial debate. The heads show broad noses, full lips, pronounced facial features, and cranial proportions that many observers, including anthropologists, art historians, and casual visitors, describe as distinctly African rather than indigenous Mesoamerican. The resemblance is striking enough that it can be easily dismissed as modern racial projection or coincidental variation in artistic style. Art historian Alexander von Wuthenau spent decades cataloguing pre-Columbian artifacts from across Mexico and Central America. His collection includes hundreds of figurines and sculptures showing diverse racial features, some appearing African, others Asian, others European. The variety suggests either that ancient Mesoamerican artists were depicting people from various racial backgrounds, or that indigenous populations showed far greater phenotypic diversity than modern assumptions allow. The conventional explanation dismisses African interpretations entirely. Mainstream archaeology insists the Olmec heads simply represent indigenous Mexican populations, and any perceived African resemblance is coincidental or culturally biased. The assumption is firm. Transatlantic voyages in 1200 BCE were impossible. Therefore, no Africans could have reached Mexico. Therefore, the heads can be depicting Africans. But this reasoning is circular. using the assumption of impossibility to prove impossibility. Consider the counter-arguments. Biochemical anthropologist Ivan van Sertima, in his controversial book, They Came Before Columbus, documented botanical, linguistic, and cultural similarities between West Africa and ancient Mesoamerica. Similar pyramid construction techniques shared mythological motifs, including creation myths with strikingly parallel narratives, agricultural practices that appear in both regions, mummification traditions practiced in both Egypt and ancient Peru using similar techniques and materials. The skepticism about African maritime capabilities itself deserves scrutiny. Why assume ancient Africans could cross the Atlantic? The Phoenicians, another ancient seafaring people, are known to have circumnavigated Africa around 600 BCE. Arab TAOs crossed the Indian Ocean for millennia, reaching as far as Indonesia and East Africa. Polynesian navigators colonized islands across the vast Pacific, using only outrigger canoes and celestial navigation. Why would West Africans alone be incapable of ocean voyages? Thor Heyerdahl demonstrated Atlantic crossing feasibility with reed boats. The same technology was available in Africa. Reed boats on the Nile, Lake Chad, and other African waterways show the technology existed. Accidental crossings are also possible. Fishing boats caught in storms, blown off course by currents, could reach South America. The North Equatorial Current flows directly from West Africa to the Caribbean. A vessel caught in this current could drift across in weeks. Some skeletal evidence exists, though it is heavily disputed. Remains found in ancient Mexican sites have shown cranial measurements that some anthropologists argue are consistent with African populations. However, cranial morphology is contentious. Individual variation, genetic drift, and environmental factors can all influence skull shape, making racial identification from skeletal remains uncertain. Linguistic parallels add another layer. Researcher Clyde Winters has documented similarities between Manding languages of West Africa and some Mayan vocabulary, though mainstream linguists dismiss these as coincidental or mistakenly identified cognates. Shared vocabulary could emerge from ancient contact, but proving linguistic borrowing versus coincidental similarity is extraordinarily difficult. The institutional resistance to exploring these possibilities is telling. Museums displaying Olmec heads never discuss the African features debate in their educational materials. When mentioned at all, it is usually to dismiss it as disproven or pseudo-scientific. Yet without engaging seriously with the evidence or explaining precisely what has been disproven, part of the resistance is historical baggage. Diffusionist theories, the idea that cultural innovation spread from advanced civilizations to primitive ones, have been used to justify racism and colonialism. The assumption that indigenous Americans could have developed sophisticated civilizations independently, needing outside influence from Africans, Asians, or even extraterrestrials, is indeed problematic and often racist. But acknowledging possible ancient contact doesn't diminish indigenous achievement. It enhances our understanding of ancient peoples' capabilities. If Africans crossed the Atlantic in 1200 BCE, that demonstrates remarkable maritime sophistication. If Mesoamericans incorporated foreign visitors into their culture, that shows cosmopolitanism and adaptability. Contact doesn't mean conquest or superior influence. It means interaction between capable peoples. The Olmec heads remain enigmatic. Perhaps they depict indigenous rulers whose features happen to appear African to modern eyes. Perhaps they represent actual African individuals who reached Mexico and became significant enough to warrant colossal monuments. Perhaps they reflect genetic diversity within ancient Mexican populations that we don't fully understand. What is certain is that dismissing the question without serious investigation reflects institutional bias rather than scientific rigor. Possible African presence in ancient Mexico suggests transatlantic contact. But contact implies not just isolated voyages, but potentially regular trade routes and cultural exchange. Evidence our next artifacts suggest existed across vast distances in prehistory. Pyramids appear on every continent, aligned to the same stars built around the same dates. Yet mainstream archaeology insists they all coincidental. Step back from the details of individual cultures and a striking pattern emerges. Pyramid construction appears independently across civilizations worldwide, often during remarkably similar time periods, using similar techniques, and oriented to similar celestial alignments. Egypt's pyramids begin around 2600 BCE with Djoser's step pyramid, reaching their peak with the Great Pyramid of Giza around 2560 BCE. Mesopotamian ziggurats, stepped pyramids dedicated to gods, appear around 2100 BCE in Sumeria. The Caral pyramids in Peru date to approximately 2600 BCE, contemporary with Egypt's pyramid age, on the opposite side of the planet. China's mysterious pyramids near Axi, and though officially dated to around 200 BCE, may be much older based on satellite imagery and limited exploration. Indonesia's Gunung Padang, still under investigation and hotly disputed, might date to 9000 BCE based on some geological analyses, though this remains unconfirmed. The structural similarities are remarkable. Stepped platforms rising toward the sky, precise orientation to cardinal directions, north, south, east, west, astronomical alignments to solstices, equinoxes, or specific star patterns. Internal chambers, sometimes containing burials or ritual objects. Massive stone construction using blocks weighing tons, fitted with impressive precision. Two competing theories attempt to explain these similarities. The parallel development hypothesis argues that pyramids represent a natural architectural solution. If you want to build tall with primitive technology, stepping the structure inward as it rises provides stability. The form is so logical that different cultures would naturally converge on similar designs independently. Orientation to cardinal directions is practical. The sun's east-west path provides obvious reference points. Astronomical alignments reflect universal human fascination with the heavens. This explanation has merit. Convergent evolution appears throughout human culture. Different societies independently develop similar solutions to similar problems. Pottery, agriculture, writing, and urban planning all emerged independently in multiple locations. Why not pyramids? But the diffusionist theory points to specific details that seem beyond coincidence. The Great Pyramid of Giza aligns to Orion's belt. Teotihuacan in Mexico shows similar Orion alignment. Both use the same pyramid configuration, matching the three stars in Orion's belt. Both incorporate the golden ratio, Phi and PIP, into their dimensions. Both show evidence of precise astronomical and mathematical knowledge. The clustering of dates is striking. Around 2600 BCE, pyramids appear in both Egypt and Peru, geographically separated by thousands of miles of land and ocean, yet built within the same century. Another cluster appears around 1200 BCE, with Olmec pyramids in Mexico. These coincide with periods of broader cultural development, the emergence of writing, metallurgy, and complex urban societies. But the simultaneous pyramid construction across vast distances raises questions about shared knowledge or parallel response to similar circumstances. Graham Hancock's controversial hypothesis proposes a lost civilization, an advanced prehistoric culture that survived from before the Younger Dryas catastrophe, 10,800 BCE, spread knowledge of pyramid construction, astronomy, and mathematics to various regions, then disappeared, leaving only their teachings incorporated into later civilizations like Egypt, Sumeria, and the Olmecs. This would explain why early civilizations seem to emerge, fully formed, with sophisticated knowledge, rather than showing gradual development. Mainstream archaeology firmly rejects this hypothesis, noting the lack of physical evidence for any such civilization. No cities, no tools, no artifacts that can be definitively dated to a pre-existing advanced culture spreading knowledge globally. The absence of evidence is a significant problem for the lost civilization theory. Yet patterns persist. Global flood myths appearing in nearly every ancient culture, describing catastrophic deluges that destroyed previous worlds. Similar astronomical knowledge tracking precession, understanding eclipses, mapping planets, appearing in supposedly isolated civilizations. Shared mythological themes, gods descending from the sky, teaching humanity agriculture and astronomy, then departing. Parallel architectural traditions using massive stones, precise alignments, and sophisticated engineering. Museums present each pyramid culture in isolation. Egyptian exhibits focus on pharaohs and hieroglyphics. Mesoamerican halls emphasize Mayan and Aztec achievements. Peruvian collections showcase Inca engineering, Rarely are these traditions compared directly or the global patterns highlighted. Each culture is credited with independent innovation, which may be correct, but the similarities remain remarkable. Are pyramids evidence of human universality? All cultures independently creating similar structures because the form is naturally appealing and practical, or evidence of forgotten global connections, knowledge spreading from a common source, or traveling through prehistoric trade networks we don't recognize? The question remains open, the pattern remains undeniable, and the pyramids remain standing, monuments to achievements we still don't fully understand. Global pyramid patterns suggest either remarkable parallel development or forgotten ancient connections. But connections require communication, and our next artifacts contain linguistic and symbolic similarities across supposedly isolated cultures that demand explanation. Around 10,800 BCE, something hit Earth so hard it reset civilization. Evidence is buried in a thin layer of sediment across 3 continents. The story of human civilization, as we've been taught it, shows gradual progress, slow development from hunter, gatherers to farmers to city, builders, over thousands of years. But geological evidence suggests a different narrative, one of catastrophic disruption that may have reset human development and erased an earlier, more advanced culture. The Younger Dryas period, lasting from approximately 10,800 to 9,600 BCE, represents a sudden return to Ice Age conditions after Earth had been gradually warming for millennia. Temperatures plunged, glaciers advanced, megafauna, mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, giant sloths, went extinct across North America. The Clovis culture, the dominant human population in North America, largely disappeared or radically changed. The conventional explanation attributes this climate reversal to changes in ocean circulation patterns. Freshwater from melting glaciers disrupting the North Atlantic current, triggering feedback loops that cooled the planet. This is plausible and supported by some evidence, but it doesn't explain everything. In the 1990s and 2000s, researchers began finding anomalies in sediment layers dating to the Younger Dryas boundary. Approximately 10,800 BCE, a thin black layer appears across North America, Europe, and parts of the Middle East. When analyzed, this layer contains materials that shouldn't be there, nanodiamonds, formed only under extreme heat and pressure, platinum group elements in concentrations far exceeding normal background levels, carbon spherules, microscopic balls of carbon formed at high temperatures, and shocked quartz crystals showing microscopic fractures characteristic of impact events. These materials are markers of cosmic impact, either a direct collision with Earth or an airburst explosion in the atmosphere. The geographic distribution suggests multiple impacts or fragments from a comet that broke apart in Earth's atmosphere, scattering debris across a wide area. The impact hypothesis, championed by researchers like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson, proposes that a comet or asteroid struck the North American ice sheet, causing catastrophic effects. The impact would have instantly melted billions of tons of ice, causing worldwide flooding. Debris thrown into the atmosphere would have blocked sunlight, triggering rapid cooling. The energy released would have ignited continental-scale wildfires. The combination, flood, freeze, fire, would devastate human and animal populations. Geological evidence supports massive flooding at this time. The Scablands of Washington state, bizarre terrain featuring channels, hundreds of feet deep carved through solid bedrock, show signs of catastrophic flooding, far exceeding any modern river flow. Geologists now accept these were carved by megafloods, when ice dams burst, releasing entire ice-age lakes in days or weeks. The timing matches the Younger Dryas boundary. Archaeological evidence shows disruption. The Clovis culture, with its distinctive spear points found across North America, largely disappears after 10,800 BCE. Megafauna extinction follows the same timeline. Dozens of large animal species vanish within centuries. While climate change alone might explain this, the sudden onset of the Younger Dryas and the megafauna collapse occurring simultaneously suggests a more dramatic trigger than gradual warming and cooling. The controversial implication, if a catastrophic impact occurred around 10,800 BCE, and if an advanced civilization existed at that time, it would have been largely destroyed. Coastal cities, the most likely locations for sophisticated maritime cultures, would have been wiped out by flooding and tsunamis. the survivors would have scattered to higher ground, their knowledge fragmenting, their monuments destroyed or buried. Over the following millennia, as populations slowly recovered, some of this lost knowledge might have been preserved in mythology or ritual and eventually incorporated into the civilizations we recognize: Egypt, Sumeria, the Indus Valley. This hypothesis explains why early civilizations seem to emerge fully formed with sophisticated astronomy, mathematics, and architecture. They weren't starting from scratch. They were rebuilding with inherited knowledge from before the catastrophe. Mainstream science remains skeptical. While evidence for impact markers has grown, some geologists argue they can be produced by non-impact processes, volcanoes, wildfires, or normal geological activities. The debate continues in peer-reviewed journals, with neither side definitively proven. But the pattern of global flood myths takes on new significance if understood as cultural memory of real events. Nearly every ancient culture has stories of world-destroying floods, survivors in boats, and post-deluge renewal. Perhaps these myths preserve genuine historical memory, passed down through oral tradition for 12,000 years, of the Younger Dryas catastrophe. Geological evidence suggests a catastrophic event reset civilization around 10,800 BCE. But catastrophes leave survivors, and our next artifacts may represent knowledge preserved from that lost pre-impact civilization. The Sphinx shows water erosion from thousands of years of rainfall, but Egypt has been desert for 5,000 years. The Great Sphinx of Giza is one of the world's most iconic monuments, carved from a single limestone outcrop, depicting a lion body with a human head. It sits on the Giza Plateau, near the pyramids, silently watching the sunrise each morning, as it has for millennia. Conventional Egyptology dates the Sphinx to approximately 2500 BCE, attributing its construction to Pharaoh Khafre, based on stylistic analysis and proximity to Khafre. But the Sphinx's body tells a different story. In the early 1990s, geologist Robert Scotch was invited to examine the Sphinx and its enclosure, the massive trench carved into bedrock from which the Sphinx was hewn. Scotch's analysis revealed weathering patterns that don't match the conventional timeline. The Sphinx and its enclosure walls show deep vertical fissures, erosion channels running from top to bottom of the carved limestone. This weathering pattern is characteristic of water erosion, specifically rainfall over extended periods. Wind erosion, by contrast, creates horizontal patterns, preferential weathering along softer stone layers, producing the undulating horizontal features visible on wind-weathered monuments. The problem: Egypt has been arid for at least 5,000 years. The region receives minimal rainfall, certainly not enough sustained precipitation to carve deep vertical channels into limestone. Yet the Sphinx shows exactly this type of weathering. Nearby, tombs and monuments conventionally dated to the same period, 2500 BCE, show only wind erosion. Horizontal weathering patterns consistent with 4,500 years of dry conditions. The Sphinx weathering is different, more severe, more characteristic of wetter climate conditions. Scotch's conclusion: the Sphinx was carved during a period of higher rainfall, which in Egypt's climatic history means sometime between 7,000 and 5,000 BCE or earlier, potentially thousands of years before the conventionally accepted date. This hypothesis creates massive problems for Egyptology. If the Sphinx predates Egyptian civilization by millennia, who carved it? The pre-dynastic cultures we know about were relatively simple village societies, not city-states with the organization and technology to quarry and shape such massive monuments. Yet the Sphinx exists, carved from solid bedrock, showing weathering that indicates it has endured thousands more years of rainfall than Egypt's current climate allows. Additional evidence supports earlier dating. The Sphinx head is proportionally too small for its body. It looks oddly shrunk compared to the massive lion frame. Some researchers propose the head was originally also a lion, creating a full lion statue facing east, but was later recarved into a pharaoh's face by the Egyptians, who discovered this ancient monument and incorporated it into their own civilization. If the original Sphinx was a lion facing east, consider the astronomical symbolism. Around 10,500 BCE during the spring equinox, the Sphinx would have faced directly toward the constellation Leo, rising on the eastern horizon. This creates perfect sky, ground correspondence, a lion monument watching its celestial counterpart. This date also aligns with the Younger Dryas transition period and the same 10,500 BCE date that appears in multiple astronomical alignments worldwide. Mainstream Egyptologists have largely rejected Scotch's hypothesis. They argue that other weathering processes, subsurface water, chemical erosion, sand abrasion, combined with rare rain events, could create similar patterns without requiring a wetter climate period. They emphasize that no evidence of pre-Egyptian advanced cultures exists in the archaeological record, and that dating based solely on weathering is too uncertain. But Scott is a geologist, not an archaeologist. His expertise is precisely in identifying weathering patterns and their causes. His analysis has been peer-reviewed and debated in geological circles, with some supporting his interpretations and others remaining skeptical. Museums rarely mention the erosion controversy. Sphinx exhibits present the conventional narrative, carved by Khafre around 2500 BCE, contemporary with the pyramids. The geological evidence suggesting much greater age goes unmentioned, perhaps because it raises questions conventional Egyptology can answer. If the Sphinx truly predates Egyptian civilization, it stands as evidence of a forgotten culture, perhaps the same civilization suggested by the Younger Dryas evidence, destroyed by catastrophe, but leaving stone monuments that later cultures found and incorporated into their own mythology. The Sphinx suggests a pre-Egyptian civilization from a wetter climate period. But climate change implies time. Deep time measured not in thousands but tens of thousands of years, evidenced in our next artifacts. A temple complex in Turkey predates the pyramids by 7,000 years, built by people who supposedly lived in caves and hunted with stone tools. In 1963, a survey team in southeastern Turkey noted a strange hill covered with limestone slabs near the town of Şanlıurfa. Local farmers knew the site. They'd been pulling carved stones from the ground for generations. But nobody realized what lay beneath until German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt began excavation in 1995. What he found revolutionized our understanding of human history. Gobekli Tepe is a massive temple complex consisting of at least 20 circular stone enclosures with T-shaped pillars weighing up to 20 tons each. The pillars are carved with images of animals: lions, foxes, scorpions, snakes, birds, rendered with remarkable artistic skill. Some pillars show human arms, as if the T-shapes represent stylized human figures. The structures show sophisticated planning, astronomical alignments, and organizational capabilities that shouldn't exist in this time period. Because Göbekli Tepe dates to approximately 9,600 BCE, over 11,000 years ago. This is 6,000 years older than Stonehenge. It predates the pyramids by 7,000 years. It predates agriculture, writing, pottery, and metallurgy. According to conventional archaeology, humans in 9,600 BCE were all hunter-gatherers, small nomadic bands following game animals and gathering wild plants. They lived in temporary camps, used stone tools, and left little archaeological trace beyond scattered hearths and tool debris. Yet Göbekli Tepe demonstrates something radically different. Building this complex required sustained communal effort by hundreds of workers over decades or even centuries. Quarrying 20-ton pillars requires planning, engineering knowledge, and specialized tools. Transporting them from quarries and erecting them in circular formations requires sophisticated organization, work crews, logistics, food supply chains to feed workers, and hierarchical coordination. The site shows no evidence of permanent habitation, no houses, no cooking hearths, no trash, middens typical of residential areas. It appears to be purely ceremonial, a temple or gathering place. This implies the builders traveled to the site specifically for religious or ritual purposes, then returned to their settlements elsewhere. The dedication of enormous resources to non-subsistence activity, building temples rather than hunting or farming, suggests a culture with surplus resources, specialized roles, and complex social organization. The astronomical alignments add another layer. The site shows orientation to solar events and stellar positions, indicating sophisticated astronomical knowledge. Some researchers interpret the carved animal figures as constellation symbols, suggesting the builders were encoding astronomical information in stone. Then, around 8000 BCE, after 1,500 years of use, Gobekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Someone carefully filled the enclosures with debris, preserving the structures intact but hiding them completely. Why build something so massive and complex, use it for over a millennium, then deliberately bury it? Was it protection from invaders, a ritual closure, a response to changing beliefs or social structures? The mystery deepens because Gobekli Tepe is not unique. It is just the first discovered. Subsequent excavations have found similar sites across southeastern Turkey and northern Syria, all dating to roughly the same period. This region, sometimes called the Fertile Crescent, appears to have supported a sophisticated culture thousands of years before the first recognized civilizations emerged in Mesopotamia. Gobekli Tepe has forced archaeologists to revise fundamental assumptions about human development. Hunter-gatherers aren't inherently simple or primitive. They can create complex societies and monumental architecture. Civilization doesn't require agriculture. Religion and social organization might have developed first, with agriculture emerging later to support growing populations gathering for religious purposes. Some researchers propose Gobekli Tepe represents knowledge from survivors of the Younger Dryas catastrophe. People who possessed advanced understanding from a pre-existing civilization and built these temples to preserve and transmit that knowledge. The buried structures might have been time capsules, protecting important information through a period of instability. Museums have been slow to incorporate Gobekli Tepe into exhibits about human origins. When displayed, it is presented as a remarkable but isolated anomaly, rather than evidence of widespread sophistication in the prehistoric world. The implications that complex societies existed millennia before we thought possible challenge too many established narratives. Yet the stones remain, and excavation continues. Only about 5% of Gobekli Tepe has been uncovered. What else lies beneath the hills of Turkey waiting to rewrite history? Gobekli Tepe proves sophisticated societies existed 11,000 years ago, but organization requires knowledge encoded in symbols and possibly writing systems that our next artifacts suggest existed thousands of years before cuneiform. Museum curators follow a simple rule: if an artifact challenges the accepted timeline, it goes in storage. Sometimes for decades. Every major museum operates on an uncomfortable truth: they can display everything they own. Space is limited. Galleries must rotate exhibits. Conservation requirements mean some objects can be exposed to light or humidity. These are legitimate, practical constraints that every curator faces. But there is a deeper curatorial dynamic at play: the narrative constraint. Museums tell stories. Walk through any historical exhibition, and you are experiencing a carefully constructed narrative about the past. The artifacts are props in this story, chosen to illustrate specific points, support particular interpretations, and guide visitors through a comprehensible journey from past to present. This isn't sinister, it is necessary. Random objects displayed without context or connection would confuse rather than educate. The problem emerges when artifacts don't fit the preferred narrative. Objects that raise questions curators can answer. Items that challenge established chronologies or suggest capabilities we don't associate with their time periods. These artifacts become problematic, not because they're invalid or fraudulent, but because they disrupt the story. Consider the curatorial incentives. Museums compete for funding from government agencies, private donors, and academic institutions. All of these stakeholders expect museums to maintain credibility, uphold scholarly standards, and avoid sensationalism. Displaying controversial artifacts, objects that validate fringe theories or challenge mainstream archaeology, risks that credibility. Academic orthodoxy plays a powerful role. Curators are trained by universities, typically earning advanced degrees in archaeology, anthropology, or art history. Their education immerses them in conventional chronologies and standard interpretations. Challenging those frameworks feels uncomfortable, unprofessional, even dangerous to their careers. Museum directors sit on academic boards, publish in peer-reviewed journals, and maintain relationships with university programs that supply new curators and researchers. This creates institutional pressure to conform. National identity adds political dimensions. Many museums serve nationalist narratives, celebrating cultural achievements and historical significance. Egypt, Museums showcase pharaonic glory as the foundation of modern Egyptian identity. Greek museums emphasize Hellenic contributions to Western civilization. American museums frame indigenous cultures within narratives of national history. Artifacts suggesting external influence, borrowed knowledge, or pre-existing civilizations can undermine these national origin stories. There is also the reputational concern about pseudoscience. Museums fear association with ancient astronaut theories, Atlantis mythology, or New Age spiritualism. These topics attract public interest, but are dismissed by serious scholarship. Displaying artifacts that have been referenced by alternative historians risks the museum being seen as endorsing those interpretations. Better to avoid the objects entirely than navigate the complex distinction between legitimate mystery and pseudoscientific speculation. Financial motivations exist, too. Museums with blockbuster exhibits attract more visitors, which generates ticket revenue and attracts donors. But blockbusters typically showcase famous uncontroversial artifacts: King Tut, treasures, Roman sculpture, Impressionist paintings. Exhibits questioning fundamental historical narratives don't market as well and might alienate traditional audiences who want comfortable, familiar history. Some specific examples illuminate these dynamics. The Smithsonian 19th century reports document discoveries of unusually large human skeletal remains in Native American burial mounds, heights of 7 to 9 feet, significantly taller than typical populations. These remains mysteriously disappeared from collections, fueling speculation about deliberate suppression to avoid validating myths about ancient giants. The official explanation is that records were confused, specimens were misidentified, or bones were repatriated to indigenous groups. But the pattern of disappearance is striking. The Vatican archives represent another mystery. Estimated to contain 53 miles of shelving holding centuries of documents, most remains inaccessible to outside researchers. Access is tightly controlled, with applications requiring specific justifications and often taking years. What ancient texts, maps, or historical records might be stored there that challenge conventional narratives? The secrecy itself fuels speculation. Individual artifacts removed from display also create questions. The Baghdad batteries, initially exhibited, gradually moved to storage as their electrical properties generated uncomfortable questions. Various precise Egyptian stone vessels disappeared from public view. The Piri Reis map, though occasionally displayed, rarely receives prominent exhibition space or detailed analysis of its anomalous features. Museums walk a tightrope between education and entertainment, scholarship and accessibility, tradition and innovation. But when that balance consistently tips toward hiding uncomfortable evidence rather than grappling with genuine mysteries, it suggests institutional priorities that protect narratives at the expense of truth. Seeking museums suppress artifacts for various institutional reasons, but suppression requires cooperation, academic networks that police what can be said about history, and punish those who challenge orthodoxy. In archaeology, questioning the accepted timeline doesn't just lose you arguments. It loses you your job, your funding, and your professional reputation. Academic archaeology operates through gatekeeping systems designed to maintain quality and rigor. Peer review ensures published research meets scholarly standards. Credentialing systems, PhDs from recognized universities, establish expertise. Grant funding channels research toward productive questions. Professional societies set ethical guidelines and best practices. These mechanisms serve important functions. They prevent pseudoscience, maintain methodological consistency, and build cumulative knowledge. But these same systems can suppress legitimate challenges to established paradigms. Consider the career arc of a young archaeologist. To establish credibility, they need publications in peer-reviewed journals. But who reviews their submissions? Senior scholars trained in conventional chronologies and traditional interpretations. A paper challenging fundamental assumptions, proposing much earlier dates for civilizations, suggesting trans-oceanic contact, or questioning the capabilities of ancient cultures, faces skeptical reviewers who built careers on the very models being challenged. Even if the evidence is strong, the burden of proof becomes asymmetric. Conventional interpretations are assumed correct until definitively disproven. Alternative interpretations must meet much higher evidentiary standards. One anomaly isn't enough. 10 anomalies get explained away, and even 100 anomalies might be dismissed as a series of coincidences rather than pattern evidence requiring new frameworks. Geologist Robert Scotch experienced this firsthand. His geological analysis of the Sphinx, published and peer-reviewed in scientific journals, met fierce resistance from Egyptologists. Despite his credentials and expertise specifically in weathering patterns, his conclusions were dismissed by a field, Egyptology, in which he was credentialed. The gatekeeping worked in reverse. Archaeologists, not geologists, controlled the narrative about archaeological monuments, even when geological expertise was directly relevant. Archaeologist Virginia Steen McIntyre faced even harsher consequences. Working on the Hueyatlaco site in Mexico in the 1970s, she conducted multiple dating analyses, fission track, uranium series, and geological stratigraphy, all indicating the site was approximately 250,000 years old. This contradicted the established belief that humans first arrived in the Americas around 13,000 years ago. Her findings were refused publication by multiple journals, her professional relationships deteriorated, and she eventually lost her position. The evidence was solid, but the implications were too radical for the field to accept. Funding mechanisms reinforce orthodoxy. Research grants typically support projects that build incrementally on existing knowledge. Proposals questioning fundamental assumptions are seen as risky, speculative, or poorly grounded. Why fund someone to search for pre-Egyptian civilizations when mainstream scholars are convinced none existed? Why finance trans-Atlantic contact research when consensus says it is impossible? Grant committees, composed of established scholars, naturally favor research consistent with their own understanding. The labeling strategy effectively marginalizes dissent. Researchers questioning orthodox timelines get tagged as alternative historians, pseudo-archaeologists, or fringe theorists, labels that allow mainstream academics to dismiss their work without engaging the evidence. Once labeled, a researcher finds journals 1T publish them, conferences 1T invite them, and universities 1T hire or tenure them. The label becomes a career-ending mark. Graham Hancock, despite producing well-researched books that sell millions of copies and creating documentaries watched by millions, is dismissed by academic archaeology as a pseudoscientist. His work is not debated or seriously engaged. It is simply rejected because he lacks formal archaeological credentials and questions established chronologies. Yet his books reach far more people than academic journals ever will, creating a parallel knowledge system that mainstream scholarship can control. The generational problem perpetuates itself. Young scholars who might question orthodoxies recognize that doing so jeopardizes their careers before they establish themselves. They learn to stay quiet, conform to acceptable interpretations, and wait until they've achieved senior positions before voicing doubts. By then, they reinvested in the existing system and reluctant to upset the structures that granted them status. Meanwhile, genuine anomalies remain unexplained. Uncomfortable evidence stays hidden in storage, and the timeline stays frozen, protected not by evidence, but by institutional inertia and professional self-interest. Academic gatekeeping suppresses challenges to orthodox timelines. But why such fierce resistance? What is at stake if we admit our historical timeline might be wrong? Admitting our timeline is wrong means every history textbook, every museum narrative, every national origin story needs rewriting. That is why they resist. The resistance to revising historical timelines isn't just academic stubbornness. It reflects deep stakes for institutions, nations, and our collective understanding of human progress. For academic institutions, acknowledging fundamental errors in established timelines undermines public trust in expertise. Universities have taught these chronologies for generations. Textbooks, curricula, and countless PhD dissertations rest on conventional dating and cultural sequences. Admitting they've been wrong about something so fundamental creates crisis. If the timeline of civilization is incorrect, what else are they wrong about? Why should the public trust expert consensus on any historical question? National identities intertwine with historical narratives. Egypt's modern identity celebrates being the cradle of civilization, the first great empire, the inventors of monumental architecture and hieroglyphic writing. If the pyramids and Sphinx predate Egyptian civilization, built by an unknown culture that Egyptians later discovered. It disrupts that origin story. Similarly, Western narratives of progress from primitive to advanced cultures, with Greece and Rome as foundational, collapse if evidence shows sophisticated global civilizations existed much earlier. Indigenous identity politics add another layer. If transatlantic contact brought African or European influence to pre-Columbian Americas, does that diminish indigenous achievement? Some Native American groups resist theories of prehistoric contact precisely because such theories have historically been used to deny indigenous peoples credit for their own civilizational development. The assumption that natives couldn't have built sophisticated cities without outside help has racist implications. Psychological factors matter too. Humans crave certainty about the past. History provides foundation. Knowing where we came from helps us understand who we are. Uncertainty creates existential discomfort. If we don't really know when civilizations began, or how knowledge spread, or whether catastrophes reset human development, then the past becomes murky and unreliable. The narrative of steady progress, humanity slowly climbing from primitive to sophisticated, is emotionally satisfying and supports modern assumptions about technological superiority. There is contemporary relevance too. If advanced civilizations have collapsed before, losing all their knowledge and leaving only fragments behind, it suggests modern civilization isn't as secure as we assume. Climate change, nuclear weapons, pandemics, or cosmic impact could reset us just as past catastrophes apparently did. This is an uncomfortable thought that challenges narratives of inevitable progress and human mastery over nature. Political implications complicate discussion. Acknowledging African maritime achievements or Asian influence in the Americas disrupts Eurocentric historical frameworks. But some alternative history theories carry racial baggage. Ancient alien theories often implicitly suggest non-European peoples couldn't have built pyramids or sophisticated monuments without extraterrestrial help. Any discussion of alternative timelines risks association with these problematic interpretations. Yet there is potential gain in openness to evidence. A more accurate understanding of human capabilities and ingenuity might reveal that ancient peoples were remarkably sophisticated, worthy of greater respect than primitive labels suggest. Recognizing that civilizations rise, fall, and lose knowledge creates realistic humility about modern society's permanence and security. The epistemological question matters too. How do we know what we know about the past? All historical knowledge involves interpretation of incomplete evidence. Maybe we should hold our timelines more tentatively, remaining open to revision when new evidence emerges. This isn't abandoning standards, it is good science. Paradigms shift in all scientific fields when evidence accumulates beyond what existing frameworks can explain. Historical revision is normal in science. Plate tectonics was fringe theory, ridiculed by geologists until evidence became overwhelming. The Big Bang was initially mocked. Numerous settled questions, the age of Earth, the extinction of dinosaurs, human evolution, have been radically revised as new evidence emerged. Why should history be exempt from this process? The next generation of scholars might be more open to these questions. Having grown up with easy access to alternative perspectives via the internet, they're less deferential to institutional authority. They've seen how quickly consensus can shift on various topics and are more comfortable with uncertainty. Ultimately, the stakes come down to truth, seeking versus institutional comfort. Are we more interested in protecting established narratives and reputations, or in following evidence wherever it leads, even into uncomfortable territory? Understanding what is at stake in historical revision helps explain institutional resistance. But resistance can't suppress all evidence forever. Our next chapter examines new technologies and discoveries that are making it harder to ignore timeline, breaking artifacts. Laser scanning reveals tool marks on ancient statues that shouldn't exist. Evidence of high-speed machinery. In cultures that supposedly used copper chisels, the archaeological revolution of the 21st century isn't happening in dusty excavations. It is happening through technology that reveals information invisible to previous generations of researchers. LiDAR, light detection and ranging, has transformed archaeology. Aircraft or drones equipped with laser scanners map terrain with incredible precision, penetrating jungle canopy to reveal structures underneath. In 2018, a LiDAR survey of Guatemala's Petén region discovered over 60,000 previously unknown Maya structures hidden beneath rainforest. In one survey, the mapped extent of Mayan civilization quadrupled. Entire cities, road networks, agricultural terraces, and defensive fortifications appeared in the data, evidence that Mayan society was 4 times larger and more complex than previously thought. Ground. Penetrating radar maps buried structures without excavation, showing foundations, walls, and chambers beneath the surface. This technology revealed massive complexes surrounding famous monuments. Stonehenge turns out to be part of a vast prehistoric landscape with dozens of additional structures. Egyptian sites surveyed with ground. Penetrating radar show extensive underground architecture, tunnels, chambers and structures that haven't been excavated, but can now be mapped and studied without disturbing them. Advanced chemical analysis identifies materials, origins and composition with precision impossible decades ago. Trace element analysis can determine which specific quarry supplied stone for a monument, revealing trade networks and construction logistics. Residue analysis detects organic materials in pottery or on tools, showing what ancient peoples ate, drank, or used for medicine. DNA analysis of ancient populations has revolutionized understanding of human migration and interaction. Genetic evidence has confirmed trans-Pacific contact between Polynesians and South Americans around 1200 CE, exactly what oral traditions claimed but mainstream archaeology denied. Ancient DNA from Egyptian mummies shows genetic diversity, suggesting more population mixing and movement than assumed. Precision. 3D scanning of monuments reveals construction details invisible to naked eye examination. When researchers scanned Egyptian statues and stone vessels with coordinate measuring machines and laser scanners, they discovered tool marks suggesting high-speed rotary equipment rather than hand chiseling. The marks are microscopic, grooves showing consistent spacing and depth characteristic of machine tools, not the variable marks human hands inevitably produce. Chemical analysis of Roman concrete reveals compositions modern science can replicate. Roman maritime concrete, used in harbour structures, still standing after 2,000 years, actually grows stronger in seawater through complex chemical reactions. We don't fully understand. Ancient builders possessed knowledge we've lost. Technology democratizes archaeology. Satellite imagery is publicly available. Amateur researchers have discovered pyramids in Amazon rainforest, medieval settlements in Europe, and ancient cities in the Middle East simply by examining Google Earth. Crowdsourcing platforms allow thousands of volunteers to analyze satellite photos, identifying potential archaeological sites that professional archaeologists then investigate. This creates public pressure for official investigation of anomalous findings. The institutional response has been mixed. Mainstream archaeology initially resisted technological findings that challenged established narratives. The Maya lidar discovery was so massive, revealing a civilization orders of magnitude larger than textbooks claimed, that traditional archaeologists struggled to accept it. But objective data is harder to dismiss than interpretive arguments. You can debate what an artifact means, but when imaging shows there are 60,000 more structures than you thought existed, the evidence is undeniable. Technology also exposes frauds and corrects misidentifications. Many supposed anomalies turn out to have conventional explanations when properly analyzed. The Bosnian pyramid controversy. Claims of massive pyramids in Bosnia dating to 10,000 BCE, largely collapsed under technological scrutiny, showing the formations are probably natural hills with some human modification, not constructed pyramids. Specific case studies demonstrate technology's impact. Scanning the Great Pyramid revealed unknown voids and chambers, large spaces inside the structure that Egyptologists did know existed. These chambers challenge our understanding of the pyramid's interior design and purpose. Sonar mapping of Yonaguni structures off Japan revealed right angles and apparent carving underwater, raising questions about whether these formations are natural or artificial. And, if artificial, when they were created before sea level rise submerged them. Chemical analysis of Stonehenge's bluestones, massive stones of a different type than the local geology, proved they were transported 150 miles from Wales, demonstrating logistical capabilities exceeding previous estimates of Neolithic British culture, organisation and resources. The next decade will likely bring revolutionary discoveries as these technologies become more affordable and accessible, applied to understudied regions and museum storage collections. that have never been thoroughly analyzed with modern techniques. Modern technology reveals hidden details about ancient artifacts, but the most revolutionary discoveries come from places we haven't looked yet, underwater sites that might contain evidence of civilizations lost to rising seas. During the Ice Age, sea levels were 400 feet lower, meaning any coastal cities from that era are now underwater, undiscovered, erased by the rising seas. Human civilization has always clustered near water. Rivers provide fresh water and transportation. Coasts offer fishing and maritime trade. Today, major cities, New York, London, Mumbai, Tokyo, all sit on coasts or major rivers. There is no reason ancient civilizations would be different. The most desirable land for settlement would have been coastal plains with access to the sea. But during the last glacial maximum, approximately 20,000 years ago, sea levels were 400 feet lower than today. Massive ice sheets locked up enormous quantities of water, exposing vast coastal plains that are now submerged. The Persian Gulf was dry land. The Mediterranean coastline extended miles further out. Land bridges connected Indonesia, Malaysia, and other modern islands into continuous landmasses. The North Sea was Doggerland, a large region connecting Britain to continental Europe, inhabited by hunter-gatherers whose settlements are now 100-plus feet underwater. As ice melted from 15,000 BCE to 5,000 BCE, these coastal areas gradually flooded. If sophisticated civilizations existed during this period, their cities, ports, and monuments would now be underwater, difficult and expensive to discover, hidden beneath sediment and centuries of marine growth. Documented underwater structures challenge conventional timelines. The Yonaguni Monument off Japan's coast sits at approximately 100 feet depth, showing apparent terracing, right angles, and carved features. Dating suggests this area was above water around 10,000 BCE, before sea level rise submerged it. The structure's artificial nature remains debated. Some researchers see clear evidence of quarrying and carving, while skeptics argue natural geological processes can create similar formations. The debate continues, but the structure's existence raises questions about who might have worked stone in this region before it flooded. The Gulf of Cambay, Kamhat, off India's coast, has yielded sonar images showing geometric patterns underwater, straight lines, right angles, and formations, suggesting structural remains. Artifacts recovered from the site have been dated to approximately 7,500 BCE, potentially making these among the oldest urban remains ever discovered. Indian researchers propose these represent a drowned city, possibly from the Indus Valley civilization's predecessors. Western archaeology remains skeptical, noting that identification of structures underwater through sonar alone is uncertain. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas consists of limestone blocks arranged in linear formations underwater off the coast. Discovered in 1968, it sparked immediate controversy. Some researchers see clear evidence of deliberate construction, regular shapes, apparent quarrying, intentional placement. Others argue these are natural beach rock formations, limestone deposits that can fracture into block-like shapes through natural processes. The debate illustrates how difficult underwater archaeology can be. Structures that would be obviously artificial on land become ambiguous underwater. Dwarka, off India's western coast, shows structural remains underwater matching descriptions in ancient Hindu texts of a city submerged by rising seas. Marine archaeology has documented walls, foundations, and artifacts suggesting significant habitation. The site demonstrates that ancient flood myths might preserve genuine historical memories of coastal cities lost to sea level rise. The Black Sea Deluge hypothesis proposes a catastrophic flooding event around 5,600 BCE. Geological evidence suggests the Black Sea was originally a freshwater lake. Rising Mediterranean waters eventually breached the Bosphorus Strait, causing salt water to cascade into the Black Sea basin in a catastrophic flood, potentially inundating thousands of square miles of inhabited land within days or weeks. Marine archaeologist Robert Ballard, famous for discovering the Titanic, found evidence of ancient shorelines and possible structures under Black Sea waters, supporting the hypothesis. This event might be the historical basis for various flood myths, including Noah's Ark. The fundamental problem with underwater archaeology is cost and accessibility. Deep water exploration requires specialized equipment, trained divers, and expensive research vessels. Most underwater sites exist in poor visibility conditions. Murky water, sediment, and marine growth obscure structures. Thousands of miles of ancient coastline remain unsurveyed, potentially hiding cities, ports, and monuments that could revolutionize our understanding of prehistory. Underwater archaeology might reveal lost coastal civilizations, but oceans aren't the only frontier. Our final section examines how space-age technology is finding hidden structures under jungles, deserts, and ice that challenge our understanding of ancient capabilities. Satellites revealed 60,000 Maya street ruptures hidden under jungle. In 1 year, how many civilizations are still out there, waiting to be found? The view from space is transforming archaeology. NASA and commercial satellites detect subtle ground variations, invisible at surface level. Buried structures create density differences that show up in various imaging spectra. Infrared detects crop growth patterns. Plants grow differently over buried foundations, revealing outlines of ancient buildings. Thermal imaging shows subsurface structures through temperature differentials. Ground moisture varies where ancient walls or roads exist beneath the surface, creating patterns visible from orbit. Major discoveries from satellite analysis have rewritten regional histories. The 2011 discovery of 17 previously unknown pyramids in Egypt, using satellite imagery that detected density variations, shocked Egyptologists. How could there be major pyramids nobody knew about? But Egypt is vast, much of it unsurveyed, and structures buried beneath sand reveal themselves to surface examination. The Nazca Line's discovery illustrates technology's power. Ground level. These massive geoglyphs are difficult to recognize. You see trenches and cleared areas, but can perceive the overall patterns. From the air, elaborate animal and geometric figures emerge. In 2019, researchers using drones and high-resolution photography discovered over 500 previously unknown Nazca lines, more than doubling the known quantity. Some are subtle, others had been partially destroyed by modern development. But technology revealed patterns human eyes walking the ground had missed for centuries. Angkor Wat's true extent was revealed through LiDAR mapping in 2015 to 2016. The temple complex, already recognized as a major site, turned out to be part of a massive urban complex spreading over 1,000 square kilometers, making it the largest pre-industrial city in the world. The lost city wasn't lost. It had been absorbed by jungle growth, its extent forgotten. Technology revealed road networks, hydraulic systems, residential areas, and defensive structures showing sophisticated urban planning on a scale that challenges assumptions about medieval Southeast Asian civilizations. The Amazon hypothesis is perhaps the most revolutionary reinterpretation. Satellite imagery and LiDAR have revealed hundreds of earthwork structures, geometric shapes, roads, circular enclosures throughout the Amazon basin. These weren't visible at ground level because jungle obscured them. The emerging evidence suggests the Amazon basin supported large, complex societies that extensively modified the landscape through agriculture, forest management, and construction. What appeared to be pristine wilderness may actually be recent regrowth over the ruins of sophisticated civilizations. European diseases arriving with conquistadors may have collapsed these populations, allowing the jungle to reclaim the land. This challenges romantic notions of the Amazon as untouched wilderness and raises profound questions about the scale of pre-Columbian American civilizations. If dense populations existed throughout the Amazon, supported by agricultural techniques we only now recognizing, such as terra preta, human-engineered fertile soil, then the Americas before Columbus might have been far more populated and developed than previously believed. Antarctica represents the ultimate frontier. Satellite and ice-penetrating radar have mapped mountain ranges and geographical features beneath miles of ice. While no definitive evidence of structures exists, the technology reveals terrain that few humans have seen. If any structures exist beneath Antarctic ice, they would be extraordinarily ancient, predating the current ice sheet by millions of years. But the ice hasn't always been as extensive as today, and some regions may have been ice-free more recently. In geological terms, AI and machine learning accelerate discovery. Algorithms trained to recognize archaeological features in satellite imagery can scan terrain faster than human researchers, identifying potential sites for investigation. Crowdsourcing platforms allow thousands of volunteers to examine satellite photos, democratizing discovery. A schoolteacher in Canada discovered a previously unknown Maya city using satellite imagery from his home computer, a finding that professional archaeologists then verified. The future of archaeology is digital. As technology improves, higher resolution imaging, more sophisticated analysis algorithms, cheaper access to satellite data, the pace of discovery will accelerate. We're likely discovering ancient sites faster now than at any point in human history. How many more civilizations await discovery? How many cities lie buried under jungle, sand, or ocean? How much of human history remains unknown, waiting for the right technology to reveal it? Technology promises revolutionary discoveries that might vindicate alternative timelines. With all we've examined, impossible artifacts, suppressed evidence, and emerging discoveries, what conclusions can we draw about history, knowledge, and what museums aren't showing us? When artifacts from Egypt, Bolivia, Turkey, and Mexico all break the same timeline rules in the same ways, pattern becomes evidence. Step back from individual artifacts and a larger pattern emerges. Not a definitive answer to ancient mysteries, but a systematic challenge to conventional chronology that can be easily dismissed. Precision manufacturing appears earlier than allowed. Egyptian vases from 3000 BCE show machining tolerances. Puma, Punku blocks from 500 CE display precision engineering. Serapeum granite boxes demonstrate flatness and right angles achievable only with modern equipment. These aren't isolated anomalies. They represent a pattern of ancient precision that conventional tool explanations struggle to address. Advanced astronomical knowledge predates official discovery. Precession understanding encoded in monuments built around 10,500 BCE, thousands of years before Hipparchus supposedly discovered this phenomenon. The Nebra sky disk from 1600 BCE showing solstice calculations. Mayan calendars achieving solar year precision within seconds. These cultures possessed sophisticated observational astronomy, requiring centuries of careful measurement and mathematical analysis. Geographical knowledge appears impossible without global exploration. Maps showing Antarctica without ice, created centuries before Antarctica was discovered. Portolan charts with longitude precision predating Harrison-esque chronometer. Evidence of transatlantic contact in mummies, chemical residues, and possibly an Olmec sculpture. These suggest ancient maritime capabilities we don't officially recognize. Catastrophic destruction evidence clusters around 10,800 BCE. Geological markers of cosmic impact. Water erosion on the Sphinx, suggesting pre-desert climate. Gobekli Tepe, showing sophisticated construction immediately after the Younger Dryas. Global flood myths appearing in every ancient culture. The pattern suggests a dramatic event that may have reset human civilization, destroying evidence of earlier sophistication. Institutional suppression of anomalous evidence follows predictable patterns. Artifacts move to storage after generating controversy. Academic gatekeeping punishing researchers who challenge orthodox chronologies. Museums presenting artifacts without mentioning their most puzzling characteristics. This isn't conspiracy. It is institutional inertia and professional self-preservation, but it creates systematic bias against evidence challenging established timelines. Individually, each artifact might be explained away. The Baghdad battery could be coincidental design. The Antikythera mechanism might be an isolated achievement by a lone genius. Egyptian precision might result from patient hand. Work maps might be lucky guesses. Each mystery has possible conventional explanations, but the cumulative weight matters. When similar anomalies appear across different cultures, time periods, and continents. When precision manufacturing, astronomical knowledge, geographical understanding, and catastrophic destruction evidence all point toward capabilities greater than conventional chronology allows, pattern emerges that is harder to dismiss than individual cases. Two interpretive frameworks attempt to explain these patterns. The lost civilization hypothesis proposes that an advanced global culture existed before recorded history, possibly during the last ice age, achieved sophisticated knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and navigation, was largely destroyed by the Younger Dryas catastrophe around 10,800 BCE, and left fragmentary knowledge that later civilizations, Egypt, Sumeria, Maya, inherited, and imperfectly preserved. The parallel development with knowledge loss hypothesis suggests that human capabilities have been greater throughout history than recognized, that multiple cultures independently achieved advanced knowledge, but that this knowledge has been repeatedly lost through catastrophe, climate change, or civilizational collapse, forcing rediscovery. This framework challenges linear progress narratives, proposing that history is cyclical, achievements and losses, discoveries and forgetting, civilization and collapse. Both frameworks challenge conventional timelines. Both suggest that our understanding of human prehistory is incomplete. Both acknowledge uncertainty. The evidence is fragmentary. Interpretations are contested, and definitive answers don't yet exist. What is clear is that conventional archaeology's blanket dismissal of all anomalies is untenable. The pattern is too consistent, the evidence too diverse, the institutional resistance too revealing. Something is missing from our timeline, whether it is a lost civilization, forgotten capabilities of known cultures, or simply more complexity and sophistication in prehistory than textbooks acknowledge. Our historical timeline is due for major revision, not because of fringe speculation, but because accumulating evidence demands it. The pattern across evidence suggests our timeline is incomplete or incorrect. But what does this mean for how we understand human history and our place in time? If our ancestors achieved greatness and then lost it, it means one thing: progress isn't guaranteed, and we could lose everything too. Accepting that our historical timeline might be fundamentally wrong carries profound implications for how we understand ourselves, our ancestors, and our future. First, humility about progress. If advanced knowledge existed and was lost, it means human progress isn't guaranteed or linear. Civilizations can collapse, knowledge can be forgotten. We might not be as secure in our understanding or our technology as we assume. This has contemporary relevance. Climate change, nuclear weapons, pandemics, or cosmic impacts remind us that civilizational continuity isn't automatic. The evidence that past cultures may have achieved sophistication and then lost it should make us think carefully about preserving our own knowledge and ensuring our civilization's resilience. Second, respect for ancient people. They were our intellectual equals, capable of sophisticated problem-solving, long-term planning, abstract thinking, and remarkable achievements. The conventional narrative portraying ancient peoples as primitive is just historically inaccurate. It is condescending. The primitive savage stereotype has been used to justify colonialism, cultural destruction, and dismissal of indigenous knowledge systems. Recognizing ancient sophistication means taking seriously the achievements, knowledge, and capabilities of our ancestors. Third, cyclical history. Perhaps human civilization has risen and fallen multiple times, each iteration reaching certain heights before catastrophe reset progress. This challenges Enlightenment narratives of continuous advancement and suggests we should preserve knowledge more deliberately, recognizing its fragility. How do civilizations transmit knowledge across catastrophes? Perhaps mythology serves this function. What we dismiss as primitive superstition might encode genuine astronomical, geological, and historical information in narrative forms accessible to non-literate survivors. Fourth, knowledge preservation matters. The Spanish destruction of Mayan books, the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the loss of ancient texts through decay and neglect. These represent incalculable losses. If we acknowledge institutional bias and resistance to anomalies, it creates space for more open-minded investigation of traditional knowledge, oral histories, and myths that might preserve genuine information. Fifth, contemporary archaeology needs reform. If we acknowledge institutional bias and gatekeeping, it creates space for more open-minded investigation. This doesn't mean accepting every fringe theory. It means taking genuine mysteries seriously rather than dismissing them to protect orthodoxy. Technology is democratizing discovery, allowing independent researchers to contribute. The next generation of scholars might be more comfortable with uncertainty and more willing to follow evidence into uncomfortable territory. Sixth, ancient wisdom reconsidered. Various traditions claim ancient peoples possessed sophisticated knowledge in medicine, astronomy, psychology, and other fields. Perhaps we should investigate whether traditional knowledge preserves genuine understanding rather than dismissing it as pre-scientific superstition. Traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous astronomical systems, and ancient medical practices often contain insights that modern science is only now validating. Seventh, deep history questions. If ancient civilizations possessed advanced knowledge, where did it come from? Patient observation and experimentation over millennia, or inheritance from even earlier, unknown cultures? This raises questions about the deep history of human intelligence and capability. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for 300,000 years. We've been just as intelligent for all that time. What have we been doing for 290,000 years before civilization supposedly began 10,000 years ago? Finally, this doesn't require ancient aliens, lost Atlantis, or other pseudo-scientific theories. The evidence suggests ancient humans were remarkably capable. That should make us proud of our species' ingenuity, rather than requiring external explanations. We come from a longer, more complex, more impressive history than we've been taught. A history marked by both remarkable achievements and devastating losses. Understanding what ancient achievements mean for human history brings us to the final question. What should we do with this knowledge? Understanding what ancient achievements mean for human history brings us to the final question. What should we do with this knowledge? How should we approach museums, history books, and our own curiosity about the past? The artifacts exist, the evidence is real, the questions are unanswered. What you do with this knowledge is up to you. This investigation doesn't end with conclusions, it begins with questions, and those questions belong to you now. First, visit museums with new eyes. Don't accept narratives uncritically. Ask curators about storage collections. Request information about artifacts not on display. Question the dates, the interpretations, the gaps in the story. Most curators are passionate about history and will engage with genuine curiosity. Some might be defensive, institutional loyalty runs deep, but asking questions is your right as a visitor and a citizen. Museums are public institutions, funded by taxpayers or donors, accountable to the communities they serve. Second, read widely and critically. Explore both mainstream and alternative perspectives. The truth rarely lies in accepting either extreme completely. It emerges through synthesis, weighing evidence, considering multiple explanations. Graham Hancock raises important questions even if you don't accept all his conclusions. Mainstream archaeology provides necessary rigor, even when it becomes too rigid. Read them both. Think for yourself. Third, support independent research. Archaeological funding tends toward conventional projects. Organizations willing to investigate anomalies need support, financial or volunteer. Crowdsourcing platforms, independent documentaries, and alternative research organizations create space for questions mainstream academia won't touch. Your support, even sharing content or discussing these ideas, helps build communities of curious people who value evidence over authority. Fourth, demand transparency. Petition museums and academic institutions to digitize storage collections, making them accessible to researchers worldwide, rather than keeping them behind institutional walls. Much of what museums own has never been properly photographed, catalogued, or made available online. Technology makes democratizing access possible. Museums should embrace it. Fifth, share knowledge. Discuss these mysteries with others. Online communities, local groups, family conversations, spreading curiosity helps build momentum for more open investigation. But share critically. Don't accept every alternative theory uncritically. Apply the same skepticism to fringe claims that you apply to mainstream narratives. Evaluate evidence. Consider multiple explanations. Remain comfortable with uncertainty. Sixth, think critically. Don't automatically accept alternative theories just because they challenge orthodoxy. Many ancient mysteries have conventional explanations. Some anomalies result from misunderstanding, poor methodology, or wishful thinking. Critical thinking means questioning everything, including your own assumptions and preferences. The goal isn't replacing one dogma with another, but developing robust methods for evaluating historical claims. Seventh, recognize discomfort. Questioning orthodoxy feels uncomfortable. It challenges what we were taught, undermines narratives we've accepted, creates uncertainty about the past. This discomfort is natural, but intellectual honesty requires following evidence, even when it is inconvenient. Science progresses through uncertainty toward better understanding, not by pretending we know more than we do. Eighth, embrace uncertainty. The evidence is incomplete. Interpretations are contested. Mysteries remain genuinely mysterious. That is okay. We don't need definitive answers to every question. Sometimes we don't know yet, is the most honest response. The process of investigation, the asking of questions, the following of evidence, these have value even without final answers. Finally, remain optimistic. We live in an unprecedented moment. Technology reveals hidden evidence. Information is widely accessible. Citizen researchers can contribute to discovery. Challenging orthodoxy is possible without career destruction, at least outside academia. The coming decades will likely bring revolutionary discoveries that answer some mysteries and create new ones. The narrative of human history is being rewritten in real time. You can participate in that process. The artifacts in museum storage, the sites yet to be discovered, the questions yet to be answered, all invite exploration. Remain curious. Think critically. Question everything. And never stop wondering what else might be hidden, waiting beneath our feet under the waves, or in the basements of the world's greatest museums. History isn't finished. It is an ongoing investigation, and the most important discoveries might still be ahead. These aren't just museum pieces. They're evidence that challenges everything we've been taught. So here is my question for you. What else are we not being shown? Drop a comment with the artifact that shocked you most, and if you want more hidden history that doesn't make it into textbooks, hit that subscribe button. The truth doesn't hide itself. It gets hidden. Let's uncover it together.